This blonde swordswoman is one-shotting her way through a dungeon, feeling pretty good about her progress so far, until she realizes she's not alone anymore, because the dungeon boss just made its grand entrance, a massive insectoid creature guarding a glowing red crystal. It lunges forward with its massive scythe-like arms, and she barely manages to block the first strike, but the second one slices right through her defenses, leaving her completely stunned and badly wounded. As she collapses, her last thought is an apology to her brother. Her final thoughts drift to her brother, Rue, who promised he'd be waiting, but the dungeon boss closes in to finish the job, and she realizes she won't be keeping that promise. Meanwhile, in the city, Rue is just walking home with groceries when he's called out by some local adventurers. They ask if today's the day his famous sister Nana gets back from her A-rank dungeon clear, and he confirms she's expected back the next day. After a friendly goodbye, Rue continues on his way, but the other guys immediately start complaining about him living easy off his sister's fame, until their friend reminds them it was Rue who saved Nana when they were both starving in the slums. Turns out, he literally saved her from starving in the streets back in the day, but the jealous adventurer just waves it off, even saying Rue will be poor again once Nana dies. And back at home, Rue is completely oblivious, planning to cook a huge welcome-home meal for his sister. He immediately gets to work, showing off some serious knife skills, and starts whipping up what looks like a gourmet feast. In no time at all, a massive spread is ready on the table. He glances at his phone, realizing she's running pretty late, and just hopes she's working overtime, with no clue she's never coming home. Rue eventually dozes off at the table, the feast untouched, when his phone suddenly rings, jolting him awake. It's the Adventure Association asking if he's family to a member of the 7 Stars, and then they drop the bomb. Nana was killed in an S-rank dungeon 2 hours ago. This news hits him like a truck, and he completely loses it, knocking over the very food he'd so carefully prepared for her. This caller coldly tells him to keep it quiet, and that compensation is on the way before hanging up, leaving Rue to process the fact that his sister is just gone. His mind flashes back to the day they met when she first asked to call him brother, and then to a happier memory of her smiling in a sunlit field. His mind flashes back to her coming home after a fight, telling him she'd be back soon from her next mission, and to have a welcome home feast ready for her, assuring him it was just an A-rank dungeon this time. But back in the present, Rue realizes the glaring problem. This association said S-rank, and for a death that serious, they're supposed to use a special probe, not just call the family, and a dark suspicion starts to form in his mind. He glances at a photo of them together, his expression hardening, and 5 days later, he's standing outside the association headquarters. He's meeting with the branch head of the association, who assumes he's just there to talk about his sister, but Rue cuts right to the chase. He wants to register as an adventurer. This branch head is completely thrown by this request, and you can tell he's already getting a headache, trying to shut him down by saying he's not qualified without any abilities. He even tries pulling the "your sister would want you to be safe" card, but Rue hits back with an association rule that lets family members register regardless. With no other choice, the branch head agrees and has him escorted out, offering some last-minute support as Rue leaves, his mission just beginning. As Rue walks out, the branch head watches him go, clearly not thrilled about this whole situation. Rue picks up his brand new adventurer D from the front desk, officially registering him as an E-rank with 0 abilities to his name. He stares at the card, his resolve hardening, while the branch head recalls the inconsistencies in Nana's case. How she told Rue it was an A-rank dungeon, but the report said S-rank. This branch head had tried to brush it off as her not wanting to worry him, but Rue knows better, convinced this wasn't just an accident. And with that dark thought, he pulls up his hood, ready for what's next. He walks off, vowing to find the truth no matter what it takes, which brings him to the entrance of a D-rank dungeon, where a party of actual adventurers is heading inside to clear it. Rue, however, is stuck with the porter crew, listening to some guy fantasize about being a fighter, but our boy just keeps his head down, ready to get this over with, and follows the other porters into the swirling blue gate. Inside, the crew just sits around waiting, with one veteran still complaining he'll never get used to this life, and a rookie asks their leader, Lim, what the plan is. Lim explains their job is to wait for the party to kill the Guardian, adding that all the tough talk in the world won't help once they're deeper inside. This other porters finally notice Rue, with one of the veterans calling him out for being new, and Rue just calmly confirms it, much to the guy's obvious annoyance. An older porter starts giving him the standard rookie safety speech, but gets cut off mid-sentence by a massive, terrifying roar echoing from deeper inside the dungeon. This entire cavern suddenly pulses with a menacing red energy, as shadowy attacks start flying through the air, striking down the crew. This rookie from earlier starts panicking, screaming that they're all going to die because they never got their training. He explains that something happened at the association, so they canceled all the training this year. This is clearly brand new information for the other veterans, who look absolutely horrified. Rue, however, just realizes he didn't miss anything. The association just threw them all in here completely unprepared. This old timer explains they're just support, not real fighters, since combat is reserved for D-rank explorers and above, basically making them glorified part-timers with 0 training. Just then, a voice from the main chamber calls them over, and Lim tells the crew it's finally time to get to work. They arrive to find the main party standing over the defeated Guardian, but the adventurers are in rough shape, with a few of them down for the count. This porters are completely stunned by the aftermath of the battle, when one of them suddenly starts harvesting the monster's corpse, which absolutely infuriates the party leader, who calls him out. This party leader grabs the disrespectful porter's wrist, absolutely furious. But a female adventurer quickly steps in, telling him to back off since the guy is new, reminding him that they're the experienced ones who need to keep their cool. So he just smacks another porter and orders the whole crew to get back to work. While mining, the rookie complains about getting yelled at, but Rue explains it was disrespectful to the fallen adventurers, and when the kid panics, Rue calmly points out that's the only reason he wasn't punished more severely. This makes the rookie wonder how Rue knows so much, and our boy just says he heard it from someone, though his hardened expression tells a completely different story. His mind flashes back to Nana telling him about a rookie who died on a mission just yesterday, explaining that the kid got overconfident during training and was ambushed, a sight that traumatized another porter. Nana's memory concludes with a grim warning. A friend of the fallen adventurer took out that disrespectful rookie in revenge, and while Rue thinks that's extreme, he recalls Nana saying combat explorers always look down on support staff, which is when the veteran porter, Lim, yells at the rookie to stop slacking and get back to cleaning up monster parts, then turns to Rue, surprised he's new since he was so calm, while Rue just silently calls the old guy a jerk. And Lim starts lecturing the kid on dungeon basics, pointing out that the main goal is to destroy the core. But to even get a shot at the core, the party first has to defeat the powerful guardian protecting it, explaining that while normal monster bodies fade in 30 minutes, a guardian's timer only starts after the core is broken, which makes the rookie wonder why they're even bothering with the monster corpses if they're worthless. And another porter explains it's because you can't actually take the monster parts out of the dungeon, since the real prize comes from the guardian, which can drop rare loot like weapons or even a skill book. This veteran explains that guardians can even drop rare loot, which finally gets the rookie's attention. But Lim just tells him to hurry up since the dungeon will close 30 minutes after the core is destroyed. Back at the entrance, the porter crew finishes hauling out all the monster parts and gathered materials, and another veteran dismisses them, saying their pay will be deposited within 3 days. He offers some parting advice, warning them that just because they're support doesn't mean the job is safe, basically saying their only survival skill is running fast, which leaves the rookie completely drained. Rue, on the other hand, just clenches his fist, knowing he has to get stronger to find the truth. And 2 days later, he's back at the association, where the branch head asks how his first dungeon run was. Rue calls it weird and dangerous, so the branch head smirks, asking if the treasure was tempting, but our boy just stares him down, saying there was nothing in there worth risking his life for. This branch head just sighs, remarking that Rue and his sister are exactly alike, and leads him down the hall towards what looks like a training room, which turns out to be a massive, empty gymnasium. He asks Rue why he's really doing this, since with Nana's legacy, he could live comfortably forever, pressing our boy on what his actual goal is here. Rue explains he can't just live off his sister's money and is sick of the rumors that he's a freeloader, and the branch head admits that Nana's death can't stay secret forever, so people will find out eventually. He decides it's good that Rue wants to get stronger and says he has someone for him to meet, just as a loud voice calls out to the old man and a ridiculously buff dude appears. This new guy, an instructor named Charlie List, grumpily asks what the branch head dragged him out here for. This branch head introduces Rue to his new mentor, Charlie, the strongest fighter in their entire branch, who is immediately unimpressed, getting right in Rue's face about having to babysit some random kid. His entire attitude shifts, however, when the branch head reveals Rue is Nana's little brother. Suddenly changing his tune, Charlie reluctantly agrees to the training but warns this is a one-time favor. After telling the branch head to get lost, he gruffly orders Rue to follow him deeper into the gym. Rue tries to properly introduce himself, but Charlie just cuts him off, clearly not interested in pleasantries. Instead, he gets right to the point, accusing Rue of using his family's here privilege to get this far. He even asks if Rue was tricked, questioning if our boy truly understands what that privilege entails. But Rue just calmly confirms that he knows exactly what he's getting himself into, which is a huge deal because it turns out there's a rank beyond S called the 7 stars. Turns out this here privilege is a real thing. Elite explorers can pass down benefits to their family, and it's not just money. The heir gets to skip all the exams and even gets a shot at special training. So Charlie tells Rue to make his choice, but our boy is completely lost, asking what he's even choosing. This silence that follows is just deafeningly awkward. Charlie, looking like he's about to have an aneurysm, explains Rue needs to pick a training style: attack, defense, or speed. Since words aren't getting through, he decides a live demonstration is in order and summons a training bot. For attack training, he just casually kicks the robot's head clean off its shoulders. Then for defense, he lets 2 more bots wail on him and just stands there grinning like it's a light massage. And for speed, he zips around the room, effortlessly dodging a barrage of energy blasts, leaving Rue with the big question of which path he's going to take to get his revenge. After witnessing Charlie's insane power display, Rue stands there thinking hard about his path, and with his eyes glowing red, he looks up and makes his choice: defense. His mind flashes back to his own attempts at training, just jogging through a park, trying to push his body past its limits to get even a little bit stronger. But even that basic exercise left him completely exhausted and doubled over, making him question if this kind of training would ever actually help him get revenge. Back in the present, Charlie is genuinely impressed, grabbing Rue and calling him smart for his decision. He explains that most people choose offense or speed, thinking it's the best way to survive, but then his tone gets dead serious, revealing that's precisely why they all ended up dead, a brutal piece of information that leaves Rue completely shocked. After that grim lesson, Charlie just tells Rue to start with basic physical conditioning on his own, explaining that he needs to build up his body before they can do anything serious, which leaves Rue confused, asking if Charlie is even going to train him at all. And for his trouble, he gets a motivational slap on the back so hard it makes him cough blood. Rue just wipes his mouth and accepts the brutal terms, ready to do whatever it takes, so Charlie gives him the timeline. He has exactly 2 months to prove himself. If he doesn't reach a minimum level by then, Charlie's cutting him loose, family name be damned. With that, Rue immediately starts his training, pushing himself to the point of collapse just by running. But even when he's completely exhausted, he forces himself back up to keep going. And the days blur together as he dedicates every waking moment to getting stronger on his own. Back home, Rue immediately starts doing his own research on dungeon monsters, pulling up the file on a ridiculously tanky S-rank mythic beast, and it finally clicks why Nana was so desperate to keep him out of this life. Meanwhile, he's also been buying tons of high-protein food to bulk up, which has some local gossips complaining about how he's spending his money on fancy recovery stations, basically calling him a freeloader for living well, without any powers of his own. But Rue just ignores them, starting a brutal daily training regimen on his own, pushing his body to its absolute breaking point with intense physical conditioning, and the days just fly by in a blur of pure agonizing effort, until 1 month later the results of his insane grind are finally starting to show. A family friend named Kuji shows up at the door, looking pretty surprised to see Rue, who's fresh from a workout and just casually invites the guy inside, and Kuji admits he almost didn't recognize our boy, since all that training is clearly paying off. This old guy seems genuinely happy for him, but there's definitely something else on his mind, so while pouring some tea, Rue cuts straight to the point, asking when Nana is coming back. Kuji feeds him the official cover story about a long overseas mission from the association, then tries to play the concerned uncle, offering to listen to whatever's on Rue's mind. Turns out, he's really here because Rue's spending habits are attracting some very nasty gossip, and while Rue scoffs at getting robbed, Kuji reminds him Nana's reputation is the only thing keeping him safe. That's when Rue drops the bomb, revealing he heard something bad happen to one of the 7 stars. Kuji is immediately suspicious, asking where Rue heard that rumor, but our boy just plays it cool, so the old man presses him, admitting the association is trying to cover something up and asking how Nana really is. Rue just smirks, pointing out that if his sister were actually in trouble, he wouldn't be living this well, and the tension just hangs in the air as they both sit there in a heavy silence. Until Kuji finally relents, apologizing for prying and saying he knows the siblings always look out for each other. After turning down an offer for lunch, the family friend makes a quick exit, leaving Rue alone with his thoughts. This second Kuji is gone, Rue's expression turns dead serious, knowing he needs more information. He pulls out his phone and scrolls through his call log, looking for a very specific contact, landing on an entry he saved as idiot number 3 and finally making the call. This person on the other end is not happy, chewing him out for ignoring their calls before Rue says he needs a favor. This guy on the other end immediately gets suspicious, asking what Rue knows about the 7 stars. And after Rue hangs up on him, the contact calls right back, not letting him off the hook, even threatening to ask Nana directly if our boy keeps acting weird, which puts him in a tight spot. This contact finally spills that one of the 7 stars has died, a massive secret the association is hiding, but then he gets smart, questioning why Rue wouldn't just ask his own sister about this. And when he threatens to call Nana himself, Rue's barely concealed panic gives everything away. That reaction is all the confirmation he needs, as the guy absolutely loses it over the phone, leaving Rue to realize that someone else is already investigating what happened to his sister. He looks at a photo of them together, wondering if this is a power struggle or directly tied to her death, and with this new information, he's back at the gym, his resolve to get Aunt Stronger now completely unshakable. 2 months later, Charlie is looking surprisingly impressed with Rue's progress, who's clearly bulked up from the grind and confidently asks if he's passed the trial. This instructor grudgingly admits he barely passed and decides to get straight to the real training, offering some good news and bad news. The good news being there's only one training method for now. And the bad news, delivered with a completely unhinged grin, is that his training consists of getting absolutely rocked by a punch to the gut without any warning whatsoever, which sends our boy flying across the gym floor in a crumpled heap. Charlie just tells him to remember that feeling, since passing means being able to take that hit. But Rue just gets back up, asking if that's all. So Charlie explains the goal is building resistance. He then lays down the ultimate rule of survival. The strongest are simply the ones who stay alive. Rue takes that brutal lesson to heart, knowing that survival is the only thing that matters. So for his next test, Charlie tells him to spar a bot while he takes a nap, and the only rule is to dodge everything without fighting back, which is immediately put to the test. After getting chased around for a while, Rue gets sick of just running from the attacks, realizing that simply avoiding damage would completely defeat the purpose of this training. So instead of dodging the next punch, he plants his feet and takes the hit head-on, glancing over at his sleeping mentor as he remembers the goal is to build resistance, and with that, he decides to stop dodging entirely, bracing to endure the full assault. Turns out Charlie wasn't sleeping at all, just watching from the sidelines to see what he'd do, and he's pretty pleased that Rue finally gets it. Defense training isn't just about taking damage. As Rue gets absolutely pummeled by the training bot, Charlie explains that defense is more than just tanking hits, which is when his phone starts ringing with the most obnoxious, cutesy ringtone imaginable, and he immediately starts yelling at the caller about being overworked and sleep-deprived from running errands, until he's told an S-rank dungeon just popped up in a village, instantly grabbing his full attention. This isn't just any dungeon either, it's a massive vortex that has already swallowed most of the town, Cutting to Charlie now in the branch head's office, looking grim about the unfolding crisis, where he learns that one of the seven stars, a guy named Kazami, has given them the green light. And while the branch head seems impressed, Charlie just brushes it off, wishing someone else was available, but he quickly gets back on track, stressing that they need to handle this huge problem immediately, because an S-class dungeon that can expand across borders is unheard of, and it's been radio silence for a week. This branch head wants a timeline for this whole S-class dungeon mess, and the official report gives them a tight 45 days to sort it out. Charlie is clearly not thrilled, explaining that Kazami's team is down a key member, and on top of that, the guy's family is having a meltdown with his younger siblings vanishing. 45 days later, a new raid team finally breaches the dungeon's entrance, carefully making their way through the dark and ominous caverns inside. A silver-haired guy with some serious main character vibes is at the front, looking completely unfazed, even as one of his teammates starts panicking that the boss is just ahead. This entire party suddenly stops, sensing an overwhelming presence from the tunnel before them, and out steps the area boss, a terrifyingly massive horned rabbit with glowing red eyes. Without hesitation, the entire raid party charges straight into the boss's chamber, and their vanguard immediately clashes with a massive shadow beast crackling with dark energy, while the silver-haired guy and his two friends hang back, observing the fight's intensity. One of the team's heavy hitters winds up a massive axe swing, aiming to finish this quickly, and he lands a clean hit right on the giant rabbit as another hunter stabs it from below. With the boss down, the axeman confidently declares the fight over, ready to head back. But as the party regroups, the silver-haired guy's expression turns grim, sensing something is off, realizing that the monsters they fought were unnaturally fast for this type of dungeon. He warns his friend that their speed was weird and the dungeon felt suspiciously empty, right as his companion grabs his shoulder in a panic, sensing a new threat approaching. This silver-haired guy's companion tells him to go on ahead, promising they'll provide cover, and he just silently agrees, clearly still suspicious of the other party members. As they venture deeper, it's obvious the raid team is split into two distinct groups, until the front squad stops dead, encountering a bizarre little monster in the tunnel. This thing looks like a living playing card with a roulette wheel on its chest, which has the other team's leader grinning, acting like finding it was a stroke of luck. His friend is completely terrified by the creature's strange aura, right as another hunter blurts out their true plan. They need to sacrifice two people to an invisible monster. It finally dawns on the silver-haired guy that they were brought along to be that sacrifice, and in a completely different scene, a blonde adventurer collapses, exhausted from fighting that very same creature. This blonde adventurer explains this monster's gimmick is forcing the party to vote for a sacrifice, which is basically a roulette game against an invisible enemy until the choice is finally made. He asks if there's a countdown, but she confirms no one's ever survived to share the details. Turns out, its real purpose is making hunters turn on each other, a feature some parties apparently enjoy. Our silver-haired guy, ever the pragmatist, just wants to know if it drops any good loot. He then asks the obvious follow-up, what happens if you're the one chosen for sacrifice? She just gives him a dead serious look, because the answer is pretty self-explanatory. Back in the dungeon, the monster's head becomes a 60-second timer as her voiceover says you have to kill it, and it projects holographic profiles of the entire raid party preparing for the vote. Without missing a beat, one of the other hunters immediately selects the silver-haired guy's profile. This other hunters finalize their scummy plan, deciding to vote for our silver-haired guy and his friend as the sacrifice, and with the votes locked in, the card monster's timer starts as it officially marks its two new targets, which causes the little creature to transform into a massive fanged beast, clearly powered up by the vote. And while our guy draws his sword, his companion is already on the ground, completely overwhelmed by its aura. So the silver-haired swordsman snaps at him, asking if he's just going to lay down and die right here. But his friend is just panicking, realizing this new boss is way stronger than the guardian they just fought. Yet that tough love seems to work, as the kid forces himself back to his feet, ready for a fight, which is all the encouragement our guy needs before he charges straight at the monster himself. But his attack is completely blocked, and he gets swatted away like nothing, sent tumbling across the cavern, landing hard on one knee as his friend just stares, shocked at how easily he was overpowered. His friend gets a second win, refusing to just lay down and be a sacrifice, right as the powered-up card monster lunges forward to claim its prize. And the scene suddenly cuts away to that massive S-rank dungeon vortex over Mizuyasu village, flashing back to a different raid team that just barely made it out of the abyss, led by one of the 7 stars, Kazami Shun, looking pretty beat up after the ordeal. He's met by another hunter, who learns that their teammate Tsuyoshi was sacrificed inside, and the team's captain immediately apologizes, blaming himself for not being strong enough. Kazami explains they ran into an invisible monster that demanded a sacrifice, and Tsuyoshi stayed behind to save them, adding that he destroyed the creature responsible since it was too dangerous to exist. This captain just sighs, completely fed up with getting stuck on these nightmare assignments. Meanwhile, a high-ranking official insists on overseeing a certain process personally, revealing his belief that the so-called Child of Luck is actually humanity's greatest threat. Kazami then admits that if Tsuyoshi becomes this Child of Luck, he's prepared to take out a fellow 7-star. Back at the dungeon exit, his team reports that the threat inside might be even worse than S-Class, and one of his subordinates hands him a letter with some urgent, game-changing intel. It contains a single cryptic line about a dying light being revived, which clearly rattles the old official, who's now desperately parrying a vicious strike from the powered-up card monster, his sword straining as he's locked in a brutal clash against its overwhelming strength, and he's barely holding on, clearly struggling against the sheer force of its attack. He digs in, barely holding his ground against the monster's relentless assault, as the card beast unleashes a flurry of shadowy tendrils to completely overwhelm him. But our guy manages to dodge just in time, letting the attack slam into the cavern wall. He realizes that if this thing was truly 5 times stronger, he'd already be paced, which can only mean one thing about its supposed power-up. It's just toying with him, not even fighting at full strength. On top of that, its arms can stretch at will, so keeping his distance is a terrible strategy, and that's when he notices the card's main body hasn't moved from its spot this entire time. After getting swatted again, he wonders if its immobility is the key weakness he needs, so deciding to test the theory, he aims his sword right at the stationary target. He smirks, thinking his long-range strike actually found its mark, only for the card monster to catch his blade right in its massive teeth. His confidence immediately shatters as he realizes his big gamble failed, and the creature just grinds his sword down, completely unimpressed. While he's stuck, one of its stretchy arms whips around and grabs him from behind, slamming him headfirst into the ground with absolutely brutal force. He's left completely stunned from the sheer impact of the attack, which sends his friend into a spiral, wondering why he's even trying to fight a losing battle. Before our guy can even think about getting up, the monster's arm wraps around his waist, effortlessly hoisting him into the air like he weighs nothing at all. As the monster's grip tightens, our guy is on the absolute brink of being taken out, and he's pretty sure this is it, the exact spot where he's finally going to die. But then he has a vision of a girl reaching out, telling him it's time to go home. He recognizes her as Nana, just as their hands are about to touch in the light, throwing us into a flashback from 4 years ago, with the two of them visiting a cemetery. They're at the grave of a couple where the wife died saving her husband during a dungeon raid. He tries to reassure Nana that it's not her fault, though she's obviously still blaming herself. She tearfully admits that after seeing someone die, she became terrified of what would happen if he died too. He just says her name, but she wipes her tears, claiming she finally understands something important. Nana then vows to dedicate her life to him, saying his survival is the only thing giving her meaning. She then tells him she knows he wants to be an adventurer, but she's absolutely forbidding it, promising to stop him for as long as she's alive, which leaves him completely speechless. He just gives in, promising to drop his dream if it'll make her feel better, and when she asks if he hates her for it, he just smiles, saying she's too precious to him. That memory seems to snap something in his friend, who suddenly gets a burst of courage and charges forward, swinging his sword with everything he has to try and free our guy from the monster's grasp, which just makes the silver-haired swordsman look on with pity, knowing this is a terrible idea. His friend immediately freezes up as the monster's other arm swings around to intercept him, and he gets absolutely rocked by a massive backhand that sends him flying across the cavern, slamming him hard into the wall and taking him completely out of the fight. With his friend now just a crater in the wall, our guy is officially on his own, and the monster doesn't waste any time, opening its massive maw to finish the job, which starts crushing him in its grip, the pain clearly overwhelming him for a moment. But he refuses to go down, not until he finds out the truth behind Nana's death. He's determined not to let anyone control his fate, especially not this overgrown playing card, and with a surge of pure willpower, he decides right then and there that he will not lose, because dying in a place like this was never ever part of the plan. So vowing to avenge Nana, he starts fighting back against the creature's hold, using the arm wrapped around his waist as leverage to get closer, and he pivots mid-air to slam a powerful kick right into the card's main body. He's left completely drained on the ground after that desperate final attack, but it looks like it paid off, as the card monster shatters into digital fragments, leaving him slumped against the wall, staring at the spot where the boss just died. He wonders if he just got lucky and somehow managed to destroy its core, but coughing up blood, he assumes it was a draw and apologizes to Nana for failing, until a sudden surge of green healing energy catches him completely by surprise, followed by a blue system window popping up right in front of his face. He stares at the unfamiliar text, trying to make sense of the sudden notification, which reveals he just obtained and automatically used a single-use item called Hyper Heal, leaving him absolutely floored as he realizes he's not out of the fight just yet. On top of the heal, the system throws him a new skill called Eek's Ruse, which is completely unexplained, and back in his room, he realizes that unlike the instant heal, this new ability has absolutely no description, making him sigh about still being too weak to survive without relying on these random miracles. Right on cue, a call from his buddy Koji comes in, summoning him for their next dungeon run, and we see Koji waving him over, looking way too cheerful for someone about to risk their life again. Our guy arrives at the gate where Koji and a whole new raid party are waiting to get started, and Koji immediately checks on his injuries, but he confirms the hyper heal is patching him up nicely. His friend then gives him a reality check, saying you need a solid, reliable team to actually succeed, because most randoms are useless, and all the good hunters are already in fixed parties. Koji cuts the lecture short, telling him it's time to focus on the job as they head inside. Their next raid takes them into a vibrant mushroom forest, and Koji already looks completely stressed out, explaining this is supposed to be a low-risk, high-reward resource run, but something about it is making him nervous, though one of the other party members is thrilled, immediately finding a rare mushroom, which only makes Koji sigh about how tedious collecting all these materials is going to be, even apologizing for dragging our guy along. But he just says he's happy for the experience, so Koji leads him onward, while our guy pockets a strange, unusable item he found on the ground, and after the main fighters clear an enemy, they order Koji's group to go handle the cleanup, so he just agrees, telling our guy and another porter to head deeper into the woods with him. But as they walk, our guy discreetly activates some kind of skill from his hand, revealing a sly smirk as he looks back, clearly putting some kind of secret plan into motion. He stops for a moment, pretending to be confused by a red mushroom he supposedly dropped, and as Koji tells him to hurry up, our guy plays dumb about how it got there. Just as the party's main fighters finish off a huge mushroom-covered monster nearby, leaving the porters with the glamorous job of cleaning up the area while the others rest. 20 minutes later, they're still stuck on harvesting duty around the creature's defeated body, and our guy notes how this dungeon is all plants compared to the last one's minerals, confirming to Koji that he's collected more than enough loot for the day. Right before the ground beneath him suddenly collapses, sending him completely off balance, which launches him backward and sends his hard-earned collection of mushrooms flying everywhere. But as he falls, his hand conveniently makes contact with the monster's corpse, activating a skill. This other porters watch in confusion as the monster's corpse just straight up vanishes into thin air, leaving our guy just as shocked, realizing his accidental touch must have triggered something huge. Koji's buddy is totally lost, wondering where the monster went when they still had time on the clock, but playing it cool, our guy just tells them to forget about it and get out of the dungeon. Back at the exit, he quickly makes an excuse to leave early, promising to catch up with Koji later, and once he's safely back in his apartment, he can finally check what actually happened. He pulls up his system window, which shows he got 2 flexible mycelium from the encounter, though he's a little confused, wondering if the system didn't have time to properly analyze the process. But then he scrolls down and sees he also got an unusable mycelium, by the same kind he dropped earlier, and that's when it clicks. His EX-Ru skill can break junk and turn it into actual loot. He's fired up, realizing this skill could be his ticket to solo leveling and getting strong, but the hype dies down when he remembers he's still too weak to protect himself, leaving him to wonder how he can possibly use this broken ability without getting exposed, since he's definitely not strong enough to go into a dungeon alone just yet, so he figures his best bet is to keep playing Porter and sneakily touch monster corpses. And after a moment of doubt, a brilliant, slightly inconvenient plan starts to form, deciding he'll use this power to get stronger and finally pay back his friend Koji. Meanwhile, we cut to a ridiculously fancy mansion somewhere else in the city, where the silver-haired swordsman from the first raid is recovering from his injuries, and he's suddenly interrupted by a well-dressed man walking into his room. This visitor is revealed to be his brother, who immediately questions why he's risking his life in dungeons, and while he says he'll respect his choices, his expression is anything but supportive, adding a guilt trip about cherishing his life if he actually cares about their family. Then he turns to leave, reminding him that being an explorer isn't the only path in life, which leaves the silver-haired swordsman looking completely defeated by the conversation. And this whole ordeal pushes him to finally declare he's leaving the Kazami family for good. Meanwhile, our guy is back to training, already formulating a new plan to get stronger, realizing that to properly use his monster dismantling skill, he's going to need 2 things. First, he needs Koji to set him up with multiple fake identities to avoid suspicion, and second, he needs his friend to buy him an entire private dungeon to farm in. Koji explains the complexities of the dungeon market, stressing the need for a trustworthy buyer, and at that exact moment, the silver-haired swordsman is training, thinking he needs that kind of ally, when his workout is suddenly interrupted by an unexpected visitor approaching him, who turns out to be a young man in a formal jacket giving him a very respectful bow, prompting the swordsman to drop down from the bars to figure out what's going on. This kid introduces himself as Kazami Yasukage, reminding him they were in that disastrous raid together, and then he nervously asks if he could possibly join him as an adventuring partner, which leaves the swordsman completely baffled by the out-of-the-blue request. Yasukage explains he was inspired by his refusal to give up and wants to be just like him, but the swordsman just points out that finding him here means he was being followed. This swordsman completely shuts him down, telling Yasukage to go home because following a powerless guy is pointless, admitting to himself that while they're even, he really can't stand people who come on this strong. He then makes it crystal clear, stop following him and never come looking for him again. And as he starts to jog away, Yasukage desperately calls out for him to wait. But our boy isn't giving up that easily, watching with pure determination as his new idol runs off. Later, Kazami meets with an informant who tells him that no one's selling private dungeons lately because apparently the very patterns of how and where dungeons appear are starting to change. This informant just says nothing stays the same forever, leaving Kazami to wonder what this means for humanity. But his contact just shrugs off the world-ending implications to get back to business, pointing out that Kazami has had a stalker for over half a month, who turns out to be Yasukage waving like a maniac. Kazami's informant finds the whole stalker situation hilarious, but our swordsman is clearly not amused. He finally confronts Yasukage, telling him this whole let's party up excuse is getting really old, but Yasukage insists it's not an act. He just wants to team up because Kazami is so strong, which completely baffles the swordsman, who reminds him he's just a regular rear-line adventurer, nothing special. Yasukage doubles down, saying he's never seen anyone throw themselves into a losing battle like Kazami did, and with a burst of passion the kid declares he wants to become a hero just like him, then starts spilling his guts about feeling totally inferior to his amazing older brother in every way. Hearing about the big brother problem makes Kazami pause, the gears in his head finally starting to turn, because he suddenly puts two and two together, realizing exactly who Yasukaga's brother must be, triggering a flashback of Nana fangirling over a photo of one of the legendary 7 stars. He remembers Nana gushing over a photo of the 7 stars, the world's top hunters, and it finally clicks that Yasukaga's older brother is none other than Kazami Shun himself. This swordsman is floored, recalling he'd heard rumors about Shun's brother but never connected the dots, and he can't help but notice the two are complete opposites, which is a pretty bad look for the family. Despite the revelation, he still turns Yasukage down, claiming he just wants a quiet life without partners. But their chat is cut short when another hunter opens a portal for their next job, giving him the perfect excuse to coldly dismiss the kid and head off with his new team. Later, his party complains about harvesting a giant crystal octopus, wanting to go home early for the day, so seeing his chance, Kazami smoothly tells them to leave, offering to handle the worthless cleanup himself. This grateful hunters take the offer and head out, completely unaware they just handed him a jackpot. With his party gone, Kazami gets ready to use his dismantling skill on the octopus corpse, and the moment his hand makes contact, a familiar blue light envelops the monster, causing the entire creature to dissolve into a shower of glowing particles. His system window pops up with the loot, but this time he also gets a new skill called Bronze Body, which is a passive that permanently enhances his physical strength and durability, leaving him with a satisfied smirk as he realizes he just got a major power-up. But his celebration is cut short when one of the hunters suddenly returns, asking where the corpse is, immediately getting in Kazami's face and demanding to know what he did. Kazami tries to play dumb, suggesting the corpse was already gone when they left, but the hunter isn't buying it for a second, revealing he was timing the cleanup and knows he's lying. Kazami is desperately trying to think of a believable lie, but there's no good reason for a giant corpse to just vanish, and the hunter's expression makes it pretty clear he's not in the mood for any creative storytelling, so our guy just plays dumb, suggesting they both leave since the dungeon is about to close anyway, which earns him a blade to the shoulder as the hunter completely loses his patience, revealing he saw the monster die 10 minutes ago, so he knows Kazami's story is a total lie. He gives him one last chance to explain what happened before things get ugly, but Kazami just grabs the blade with his bare hand, completely shocking the guy with his new durability, then follows up with a solid punch right to the hunter's jaw, sending him stumbling back. In a flash, the tables have turned with the hunter on the ground and Kazami holding his sword, who coldly reminds him that he did, in fact, warn him to leave when he had the chance. With the hunter dealt with, Kazami stands over him for a moment before turning to leave, and as he exits the dungeon, he can't help but think a dark rumor he'd heard was true after all. Later, back in his bathroom, he tries to wash away the events of the day, clearly shaken. But when he looks up, his reflection is a blood-splattered, twisted version of himself, a vision that seems to be silently screaming murderer right back at him with a chilling grin. This disturbing image feels so real it's like the mirror itself is about to shatter, so he just punches it, completely destroying the glass to make the haunting reflection disappear. Leaning over the sink, he finally confronts the reality of what he just did, thinking that in a world where the law is barely functioning, killing isn't exactly uncommon. But as he wraps his bleeding hand, he accepts that he won't make excuses for his actions. He steels himself, deciding that what's done is done, and with a new cold resolve, he vows that no one will ever get in his way again. A month later, his plan is in full swing as he hauls a cart of crystals from a dungeon, where another porter greets him as Rue, one of the fake identities Koji set him up with. Kazami plays it cool, blaming his lateness on a twisted ankle, which his new buddy totally buys. Then he asks the guy to handle the loot delivery for him while he supposedly goes to rest. While another porter is suspicious, his new friend vouches for him, insisting Rue is too honest to ever cheat them, even getting annoyed and telling the other guy to back off before he really gets on his bad side. Meanwhile, the other porters start gossiping, with one claiming he heard Rue is actually Yuko's brother, but they quickly dismiss it, figuring no big shot's relative would ever be doing grunt work like this. Later, while Kazami is just trying to walk home with his groceries, he finally gets fed up with the feeling of being constantly watched, and calls out his stalker, which sends Yasukage into a panic before he decides it's definitely not him, right before Kazami appears beside him like a horror movie villain to call him an idiot. Yasukage, of course, completely loses his mind from the jump scare, and Kazami has to admit that for a total coward, the kid is annoyingly good at this. He tells Yasukage to knock it off, questioning if his hiding skills were some kind of joke, then gives him one last warning to stop following him or else. But the kid just begs for one chance. Kazami, having zero patience left for this, just turns and walks away again. But Yasukage isn't done, shouting that he's finally realized he can actually be useful. Kazami tries to brush him off, saying he sees absolutely no value in a partnership, until Yasukage offers to handle all his item sales, proving he's done his homework. As Kazami heads for the elevator, Yasukage nervously claims he just happened to notice him selling things, then quickly pivots, promising he has connections and won't ask too many questions about the loot. He swears he can be a major asset, making up for his lack of power with other useful skills, which actually gets Kazami thinking, selling solo is risky, so maybe this kid has a point. But just as he's about to answer, a massive explosion suddenly rips through the street, sending them both scrambling as they wonder why a supposed safe zone is under attack. They look up to see two people standing on a nearby rooftop, clearly the source of the chaos, and Yasukage immediately recognizes one of them as famous older brother Kazami Shun. This other person on the roof is a masked guy in a white cloak, casually floating like he owns the place, and he immediately identifies Shun as Divine Right, one of the legendary 7 stars, calling him a big fish with a smug grin. But Shun is already powering up, not waiting for the villain's speech, launching himself forward in a blur of blue energy, skipping the pleasantries entirely. But the masked man easily dodges, calmly suggesting they should have a little chat first, trying to start the classic villain monologue about his identity and grand mysterious goals, to which Shun bluntly replies that he couldn't possibly care less about any of it, so the villain tells him to cooperate. But Shun's idea of cooperation is just killing him first, as he summons a massive crystal sword crackling with energy, earning a comment on his ruthlessness, and the masked man calls that a bit harsh before gathering some seriously ominous red energy of his own. This masked man just smirks, powering up a nasty-looking red energy ball for his opening move, but Shun is already in the air, bringing his massive crystal sword down with zero hesitation, so the villain just casually flicks his energy ball forward to meet the attack head-on, and Shun's blade is just about to make contact with the swirling red projectile, when the two attacks collide in a massive explosion that sends Shun flying backward. This force of the blast knocks the crystal sword right out of his hand, which the villain catches with 2 fingers, sarcastically calling Shun's attack scary. His smugness lasts about 2 seconds before the sword suddenly lunges forward, because it turns out Shun was already behind him, swinging a second blade for a clean hit, landing a solid strike that sends the masked man stumbling back, completely caught off guard. This masked villain is just loving this, noting Shun's dual-wielding style for his personal database. But Shun is completely unbothered, basically asking if that little factoid is supposed to impress him. Turns out it does, because the villain is getting all giddy about the upcoming fight, and with that, they're back at it, clashing in mid-air like a couple of anime rivals, which prompts Yasukage to try and run headfirst into the danger zone. But Kazami immediately grabs him, demanding to know what his brilliant plan is. Yasukage insists he has to help his brother, though Kazami bluntly points out he'd just be cannon fodder, telling him if he actually cares about Shun, he'll stay put and not get himself killed. Meanwhile, Kazami is seriously wondering who this cloaked weirdo is to fight Shun on even ground, while also sneakily snapping a picture of the guy with his phone, because priorities. Kazami knows staying hidden is the smart play, but he's torn about just watching the chaos unfold, so he starts to walk off, telling a panicked Yasukage that he's going to do what he can, which apparently means heading straight back to his apartment with the kid trailing right behind him. At his door, Kazami vaguely promises to think about the partnership offer before trying to ditch him, and Yasukage immediately tries to protest, clearly not wanting to be left out of the loop, but our guy just slams the door right in his face without a second of hesitation. This leaves a very dejected Yasukage to sulk in the hallway, completely shut out. Inside, Kazami gets right to work, running the photo of the masked man through some serious analysis software, and the program quickly crunches all the data, hitting 100% in no time, revealing a full combat breakdown of the masked villain's fighting style against Shun. As Kazami reviews the data, his eyes lock onto a strange symbol the program pulled from the villain's cloak, and recognizing the small cat-like emblem, he knows exactly who to call for information. He immediately gets his info broker on the line, telling him to check out the mark he just sent over, and after 30 tense minutes, his phone finally buzzes with the return call, where his contact sarcastically confirms he's found something useful, obviously. Turns out the symbol belongs to an A-rank explorer named Komori Amon, whose logo was based on his pet cat. But the major problem with that theory is that Amon was confirmed dead last August. This broker clarifies he wasn't killed in a dungeon either, but was found near an A-rank gate with the case still unsolved, which prompts him to ask where Kazami saw it, though our guy just plays coy. His contact drops the questions and gives him a dire warning instead. That mark means it's a plunderer. Kazami plays dumb about the term plunderer, asking his contact what he means by spoils of war, which earns him a sarcastic jab about whether he's genuinely clueless or just pretending. And as he watches the two fighters retreat, he confirms they've left the area. So the broker explains that the symbol is a trophy, a mark of victory over another explorer. Then we see the broker himself, Koji, who demands Kazami ask nicely for any more details. So our boy just flatly says, please, which gets a completely unimpressed reaction. And Koji finally reveals that stealing emblems is the signature of a group called Cruz, adding that the masked man from the fight is their leader, known only as Z, a name that gets a reaction from the woman with him, who calls Cruz a weird organization. And Koji seems genuinely surprised that she's actually heard of them before. This woman with Koji mentions she's heard of Cruz before from someone named Nana, and Koji elaborates that they're a crazy but extremely tight-knit international organization. He then warns Kazami over the phone not to investigate them, reminding him he's on his own now, which prompts Kazami to ask just how much Koji knows about his current predicament. Koji reveals that the news about Nana's situation is already spreading and will soon be public knowledge, and when asked for his source, he shows off a business card for a company called Daisy, explaining he had to personally coax the information out of the president of Daisy Trading Company. Kazami tells him to keep digging into Cruz but to stay safe, making Koji wonder what he's planning, and in a room full of photos of Nana, our boy declares he'll make his move once her story breaks. Koji seems impressed by his calm, but Kazami just hangs up before he can finish his next question. He looks at a photo of Nana, remembering how he'd prepared for her death to go public, surprised the association buried the story, and he's just glad they aren't trying to use him as some kind of business bait, at least for now. With his resolve hardened, he puts the photo down and gets back to some serious training against combat robots, which starts with him taking a few solid hits right to the face, but he's clearly getting faster, weaving through their attacks with way more precision than before. Soon he's taking on multiple bots at once, moving like a blur through the training room, even managing to block attacks from two sides simultaneously, showing just how much he's leveled up. Just then, a ridiculously buff old man walks in, impressed by how much sharper his movements have become. Kazami tries to give him the credit, but the old guy just brushes it off, saying he barely taught him anything, then points out he's only been there a few times, grinning like he knows our boy's a natural prodigy. This old guy points out his growth is way too fast, basically accusing him of using system enhancements to level up, but he promises not to pry into his secrets, instead asking why Kazami actually showed up today, telling him not to bother with the just training excuse because he's not buying it for a second. So, since Kazami's staying quiet, the old man decides to drop some serious news about Kazami-shun's recent fight, inviting our boy to sit down because this is a conversation they definitely need to have. And Kazami asks what's up, only to learn that Shun nearly leveled the entire city after his battle, which is shocking because while Shun seems calm, he apparently loses all control when he snaps. And whatever that masked villain did, it pushed him into a full-on berserk mode for the first time ever, revealing that Shun is only considered the strongest of the 7 stars when he's holding back. Because the truth is, he's the only one with a limiter. Without it, he's just an uncontrollable killing machine. This old man explains how Nana was the strongest 7-star on paper, but everyone knew Shun was the real monster. And when Kazami asks why he's getting this info dump, the old guy just says it's what he came for, but our boy denies it, so the old man correctly guesses he's actually here about the masked villain. White robe, which Kazami confirms, though the old man demands a good reason before he'll spill any secrets, so Kazami drops the bomb. He knows Nana's death wasn't a simple dungeon accident, and they've been covering it up, which is apparently a good enough reason, though the old guy still tells him to back down now, admitting he knows Kazami's been scheming, and has just been playing dumb about the whole thing, giving him one last warning that learning the truth is a one-way ticket to a 99% chance of death. Revealing that White Robe is from a new group called the Saints, and the 7 stars now need a new member, leaving Kazami stunned, asking why they'd suddenly recruit a rookie unless it's because of this new threat. This old man asks for Kazami's take on the Saints, trying to figure out if they're targeting everyone or just the 7 stars, concluding that either way, taking out the top dogs is the most efficient way to cripple all the other explorers. And Kazami just dismisses the villain's motives, saying they'll eventually monologue their entire plan like they always do, guessing they're probably just some weird cult that worships a shady god, which is pretty standard villain behavior. And the old man just sighs, agreeing that every era has its fair share of delusional fanatics, before suddenly asking if Kazami chose Nana's title, though our boy just questions why they're rushing to replace her, which is apparently the wrong thing to say, because the old man is clearly testing his resolve, calling him an overprotective siskin who could snap at any moment, which is a pretty bold accusation. But Kazami gets dead serious, clarifying that to him, Nana wasn't just a 7-star, she was his little sister, and that's exactly the answer the old man wanted, giving him a proud thumbs up for his loyalty. This old man lays out the stakes. If news of Nana's death gets out, the entire nation will descend into chaos, and Kazami immediately realizes what this means, getting a grim apology for what's coming next. Because the old guy confirms their plan, insisting this is the only way to maintain stability, though Kazami just scoffs, knowing he was going to get this info dump one way or another. So the grand scheme is to just replace Nana, making it seem like she's still alive to the public, which the old man calls a well-thought-out plan. Even if Kazami looks less than thrilled about it, then he drops another bombshell. The Seeker contest is being moved up because other countries are now targeting Kazami, and our boy is completely over it, asking if his opinion ever mattered in the first place, before walking off, leaving the old man to stress about how much he hates these political games, which leads Kazami to some remote forest, apparently the location for this whole new problem. With the guild, Kazami decides to head out on his own, relying on some training permits since they're pretty much all he has left. He's banking on some seriously expensive intel he bought, hoping the location is worth the price, and it seems Daisy Trading Company delivered, finding a hidden gate in the middle of nowhere. Stepping through, he finds himself in a secluded, watery cavern perfect for some solo grinding, until he spots someone else already there, prompting him to quickly close the portal behind him. Unfortunately, the disturbance awakens a massive, monstrous shark from the depths, and Kazami can only sigh at his bad luck, realizing his quiet training plan is completely shot. This other guy in the cave, a dude with blue hair, is already trying to make a break for it, but that monster shark is right on his tail, lunging out of the water for the kill. Just as the shark is about to chomp down, the blue-haired guy dodges with a kick, landing on the water and complaining about how annoying this fish is, only to find himself completely surrounded by a whole school of them, forcing him to weave through a frenzy of snapping jaws while Kazami watches from the sidelines. And after a tense struggle, he manages to land a solid hit on one of the monsters, finally making it back to the shore, looking pretty worn out from the fight. He catches his breath, thankful that at least they're just fish and not something worse, musing that it's a good thing amphibians don't spawn here, because that would be too much. And right on cue, the sharks sprout legs and start crawling onto the land, leaving Kazami to stare in disbelief, muttering that this has to be a joke. This blue-haired guy is just relieved he survived the encounter, realizing he almost became fish food, while Kazami has apparently already cleaned up the rest of the land sharks off-screen, and his system windows immediately start popping with loot notifications for fish meat and scales, confirming he's racking up a pretty decent haul from the unexpected mob rush. He even snags a rare drop, a creepy eyeball-looking pearl that's supposedly good for your skin, and despite being totally grossed out, he's satisfied with the drop rate before moving deeper in. He soon enters a swampy forest and spots a lone glowing butterfly in the distance, which he immediately clocks as the dungeon's boss, a surprisingly delicate-looking final enemy, though he knows butterfly types are often deadly, using poison or hallucinogenic scales to attack. Deciding to test its patterns, he draws his sword and prepares to lure it into a fight. He lunges forward and one-shots the butterfly boss right through the center, but as it dies, some giant golden club thing comes crashing down from above, making him realize the butterfly was just bait while the fish were the real threat, and he barely manages to avoid the impact as the golden weapon shatters on the ground. Looking at the mess, he figures this might actually be a lucky break after all, admitting that if that decoy had been a real boss, he'd probably be dead right now. As he loots the drop, he gets a system notification for a new skill, Serendipity, promising an unexpected encounter, which seems to kick in immediately because the next thing we know he's out for a jog, when suddenly his broker Koji pops up out of nowhere, calling his name, and when Kazami asks what's up, Koji just plays it cool, asking if he needs a reason to visit. Koji offers to hook Kazami up with a reliable team, casually mentioning how much stronger he's gotten, and after a quick thanks, Koji promises to send over their contact info a little later, but then he gets serious, asking why our boy is suddenly collecting intel on dungeons and boss corpses, since with dungeon patterns going haywire, nobody is selling that kind of information anymore, and he presses Kazami for an answer, demanding to know how this all connects back to Nana, explaining that rumors of her misfortune are already causing a massive uproar at the association. But Kazami just smiles it off, claiming her mission is almost over, and they'll all grab a meal soon. So Koji drops it, instead asking where he's been hiding out, to which Kazami just says training, which is the absolute truth as we see him grinding hard against monsters inside a dungeon, and Koji buys it, patting him on the shoulder before heading off to take care of his own business. As Koji heads out, Kazami is left alone with his thoughts, wondering if getting stronger is the only way he'll ever get back someone named Yuko. Sometime later, he arrives home to find some kid has been camping out by his door, and when Kazami asks how long he's been there, the answer is a little concerning. This kid cheerfully admits he's been waiting for about 10 days, which is just wild dedication. He asks to come inside, but Kazami just tells him he can go home if he wants, which the guy somehow interprets as being accepted as a teammate, much to Kazami's annoyance. Kazami clarifies that he has in fact been thinking about the kid's proposal to join him, before immediately shutting him down with a hard no, leaving the poor guy completely stunned. He explains he doesn't need a follower, he needs a trustworthy partner, a very different job description. So instead of a follower, Kazami offers the kid a job, sell his loot for a 30% cut, but his name stays a secret, and the kid is immediately on board, even offering to cook up a training plan for a 7-star's brother, getting way too close for comfort while insisting that Kazami absolutely needs his expert guidance, which earns him a firm hand to the face as Kazami tells him to back off and go home, though he still hands over his contact info, promising to sort out the business details later, and the kid leaves happy as a clam, promising to wait by the phone for his call. A week later, Kazami is driving out to the countryside, following intel from Daisy Trading Company, having bought the locations for 3 remote E-rank dungeons to continue his solo grind, since the convenient high-demand dungeons are never for sale, especially with patterns going haywire, but he's hoping his new, slightly unhinged partner might dig up some better leads for him soon. Arriving at the first remote dungeon, Kazami steps through a portal into a bamboo forest, where the welcome party is a snake monster lunging right for his face, forcing an instant counter, and after slicing it apart, he's left wondering why an animal is at the entrance at all. He realizes this must be part of the haywire dungeon patterns, which means he needs to move fast, so with a surge of energy, he prepares to push deeper into the unstable environment, closing the portal behind him as he sprints into the dense bamboo grove. This place looks real enough, but he knows time flows differently inside these pocket dimensions. A lesson reinforced when the environment itself attacks, smacking him with a flying bamboo shoot, and before he can recover, another snake monster ambushes him from the side, but this time he's ready, catching the creature mid-lunge and charging up a powerful strike. He slices through the first snake with ease, only to find out it was just the appetizer, because the whole forest floor immediately sprouts snakes and angry bamboo shoots, way more than he can handle, and since they're spawning just out of his attack range, he decides this endless mob grind is a waste of time, so he wisely dips out, pushing deeper into the dungeon instead of fighting a losing battle against respawns. That's when he spots someone up ahead, a humanoid just chilling in the middle of the path, and Kazami is completely thrown, because a humanoid monster in a low-ranked dungeon is basically unheard of. Turns out there's a good reason for that, since most people who see one don't live to tell the tale. But instead of attacking, this elf-looking dude just asks if they've met somewhere before, which is weird, and with no system notification. Kazami wonders if this is even a monster or some bizarre new dungeon mechanic, until he remembers Nana's warning about riddle monsters whose power depends entirely on how you answer their questions. This elf-looking monster just sighs, completely unbothered by Kazumi's sudden appearance, then presents a bizarre problem about needing to pick one of 4 movies to watch. And Kazumi is on high alert, since this thing isn't attacking and has no status bar, so knowing he'd lose a fight, he decides his only option is to play along with this weird game, suggesting he just watch all of them, but the elf insists on savoring the experience. And when asked for his preference, the elf just cheerfully says he likes them all, which is zero help. So thinking on his feet, Kazami suggests using dice to make the decision for him, pulling out a die and explaining it's the only way when you absolutely can't choose. And the elf is genuinely curious, asking how it works while Kazami reaffirms this is his only shot. So with everything riding on it, he tosses the die to the ground to let fate decide the answer. This elf declares the die roll his favorite, but Kazami immediately clocks the lie since he just said he liked them all, realizing he's caught the riddle monster in a contradiction, which must be the key to winning this weird game. And as the die settles between them, the elf just looks confused by his sudden silence, so when asked what's wrong, Kazami plays it cool, saying it's nothing at all, then completely flips the script by announcing he's looking for a gift to give the monster, which leaves the elf totally baffled. But Kazami just doubles down, asking what he'd like, and surprisingly the monster plays along, picking something out of his magic book as a request, before thanking Kazami and offering a golden trinket in return. Musing about how odd humans can be, and with a friendly farewell, the elf wishes they'll meet again before vanishing in a swirl of blue energy, leaving Kazami holding the loot, completely stunned that a monster just gave him a gift instead of a fight. This loot he got is a fancy wristwatch that can nullify one fatal blow before vanishing, leaving Kazami wondering who that elf was to just hand over such a ridiculously rare item. Meanwhile, at the capital city's Seiyu Arena, a new character is having a very boring day, yawning his way through some rookie sparring matches he's apparently been forced to watch, and just generally questioning his life choices while surrounded by total newbies. His day gets worse when he sees 13 missed calls from someone named Ru, a very bad sign, but before he can deal with that, he gets another call, this time from Kazami, who immediately asks him what he knows about humanoid monsters in dungeons. This guy is stunned by the question, admitting that humanoids are so rare he's not the right person to ask, confirming they're basically myths that even the 7 stars have almost no intel on. This guy on the phone explains that humanoid monsters are sometimes connected to dungeon logs, perfectly accurate guides, and Kazami confirms the elf thing was dangerous but didn't attack, prompting his friend to ask if he killed it. So when Kazami asks what the big deal is, his friend absolutely loses it, guessing he just met Latias. Turns out Lytaz is a legendary humanoid with no profile who just hands out ridiculously rare items to people he meets, even mentioning a story about someone getting a time-stopping item, making Kazami wonder why this isn't public knowledge. Before he can answer, the guy on the phone gets seriously ticked off by something happening in the background, complaining about some rookies messing around during what sounds like an important selection exam at the arena. Kazami overhears this and asks if he's talking about the adventurer tournament, which clearly surprises his friend, and while asking who's hosting it, he inspects his new watch and pulls up the stats on someone named Ru. He's left wondering how the system even calculates these numbers, since it all feels just like a video game. His friend on the phone mentions he's handling security for an event with 7 stars present, which definitely gets Kazami's attention, though he clarifies it's just 2 of them, Fee, Shell, and North, who are currently watching the tournament from the stands. And while North seems to be having a great time, Fischl looks like he's about to explode from pure irritation, so the friend has to cut the call short to go prevent a 7-star level tantrum from breaking out. After hanging up, he takes a moment to consider Kazami's question about the humanoid monster, recalling that they usually keep info on Lyta a secret, so adventurers don't go chasing after urban legends. But he decides it's fine to share the details with Kazami and heads off to pull the files, making his way over to the Seiyu Adventurer Association headquarters to dig up what he can find. Later, inside the association's library, he tells someone he'll send the info over soon before hanging up, just as a new, much older guy asks if the person they're all waiting for has finally arrived. This president of the Adventurer Association, Jugasaki Kai, finally addresses the 2 7-stars he's summoned, but the big guy is already annoyed, pointing out they've been kept waiting for 2 whole hours, which sets Fischl off, who insists he had a good reason for being late while his colleague just ignores him. So the president cuts through the bickering with 2 requests. Fischl will train the rookies, and Charlie will handle an investigation, and in a rare moment of unity, both of them immediately refuse the jobs, flat out, leaving the president to ask with a sigh why they're being so difficult about it. So Fischl just kicks back, claiming any weaklings he trained would probably just end up dead anyway, while Charlie just stares at his phone, insisting he has no time and just wants a vacation. But the president's phone on the desk seems to signal that the decision is already made, as he calmly informs a furious Charlie his vacation has been arranged for 3 days from now, completely ignoring his protests. This president shuts down all debate by pulling rank, making his request a direct order. Fischl immediately pushes back, claiming only someone named Alpha can give him commands, while Charlie just complains about being forced to train the association's hand-picked trash. He even sarcastically asks if they're all idiots or if there's a deeper reason for this terrible assignment. But the president pivots, asking Charlie who exactly he sent that classified leader's information to, basically cornering him into accepting the mission by emphasizing how much they need his skills. Meanwhile, at some ridiculously lavish estate, the rookie training has apparently already begun, and a silver-haired instructor is already looking down on a trainee who's completely gassed out. This poor kid tries to defend himself, saying he runs every single day, but after hearing it's just a few thousand steps, the instructor tells him to quit and find a new career. This kid insists he's not slacking, explaining a childhood illness left him permanently weak, and when asked about a cure, he admits he's already tried everything, including hiring healers, so the instructor suggests hunting for a panacea in a dungeon, since they're full of rare items. But the trainee shoots that down, saying dungeon drops are pure luck and no bigwig would ever report finding one, so when asked who would trade for one, he sarcastically suggests maybe a monster would be willing to part with it, which makes the instructor suddenly ask if he's ever heard of a monster named Lyteas. This kid has no clue, so the instructor explains that even Alpha from the 7 stars encountered it once, and instead of fighting, they just had a conversation, and Lytas gifted Alpha the very weapon she uses today. This trainee is floored that a monster would do that, and the instructor adds that Lytas also does equal trades. Back with Kazami, he realizes the intel Charlie sent never mentioned trades, wondering if it was hidden on purpose. This trainee asks to borrow the instructor's villa for a while, and the guy just casually agrees, explaining he's just to train alone since all the best combat resources are owned by guilds, and he refuses to owe the association or get tied down to any specific group, adding that he'd rather not touch anything of Nana's unless he absolutely has to. Half a month later, that same trainee walks down a hallway looking like he's on a mission, kicking open a door without a moment's hesitation to confront whoever's inside, and with a furious shout he hurls his wooden practice sword with deadly intent, which slams into the wall just inches from the head of a man in a military-style uniform. This guy introduces himself as Fischl von Mestis, but the trainee is clearly not here for pleasantries, because Fischl just holds up a picture of Nana and calls him her scumbag brother. This trainee demands the photo back, but Fischl just smirks, asking if he's finally pissed him off, and when the kid insists he has no right to it, the 7-star just dares him to try and take it back. That's all the invitation he needs, immediately throwing a punch with everything he's got, which Fischl catches without even breaking a sweat, calling him a pathetic weakling. Then he grabs the kid by the throat, absolutely furious that this is Nana's supposed brother, shoving the picture in his face and screaming that he never even bothered to visit her grave. A flashback hits, showing a happy Nana just wanting to spend her birthday with him, which only fuels the trainee's rage as he's being choked out by the 7-star. But with a sudden burst of strength, he manages to slap Fischl's hand away, breaking the hold, and immediately lunges back in, grabbing Fischl by the collar, ready for round 2. Fischl goes for a condescending backhand, clearly not taking this fight seriously at all, but he's the one who ends up screaming in surprise a second later because the trainee just drove a knee straight into his gut and snatched the photo back. Fueled by pure rage, he grabs Fischl by the hair and winds up for a follow-up punch, which the 7-star catches without even breaking a sweat, looking more annoyed than hurt, effortlessly stopping the attack and showing the massive power gap between them. He retaliates with a single kick that sends the trainee flying across the room, knocking the precious photo of Nana right out of his hands and into the air. And after catching it, the kid glares back as Fischl questions his right to even be her brother. But with the picture safe, he just tells the powerful 7-star to get out of his house. Fischl just smirks, mocking the trainee for being so weak he used to get winded just climbing stairs, flashing back to a time he saw the kid looking absolutely pathetic from a distance, even telling some shadowy associate that Nana's brother was so fragile, the stairs alone could kill him. He then completely loses it, screaming about why he's only started training now that Nana is dead, demanding to know if the kid has any idea what kind of rumors people spread about her because of him, revealing everyone thought Nana was being blackmailed by her trash brother to support him. Fischl claims he's earned the right to say all this since he fought beside Nana since day one, and as the trainee slumps to the floor, the 7-star admits he was always there for her, except once, staring at her photos while confessing that if he'd been there on that day, she wouldn't have died, leaving him to agonize over why, of all days, he was the one who wasn't there to protect her. This trainee flips the script, asking Fischl why he wasn't there for Nana on that fatal day, and Fischl just scoffs, saying Nana clearly didn't know what a cold person her brother truly was. But the kid isn't backing down, revealing he doesn't believe Nana's death was just an accident, dropping the bombshell that she had an instant escape item from the dungeon but never used it, which completely stuns the 7-star, who immediately asks if she couldn't use it or just wouldn't. So the trainee explains those items are almost foolproof, meaning it was likely tampered with, and Fischl immediately defends her party, swearing on his life that none of them would ever betray her, which leads the kid to offer another theory. What if someone interfered from outside the dungeon, explaining the rule that if someone forcibly enters a sealed dungeon, the final boss's stats double, making Fischl realize her death was orchestrated by a traitor or an enemy with top-secret intel. This trainee drops another bombshell, suggesting someone used a sealing item to trap Nana's team inside, which basically turns a dungeon into a death trap by draining all the oxygen in 3 minutes. He speculates Nana probably gave her own escape item to a teammate, sacrificing herself to save them, a theory that clearly hits Fischl hard as he's left completely speechless by the possibility. Fischl argues those items are incredibly rare, but the kid fires back that a 7-star's life is priceless. This finally gets Fischl to admit he was supposed to be with Nana but got a fake distress call, a convenient emergency involving some councilman's kid that he could never prove was a setup. When asked how he's so sure it wasn't an accident, the trainee simply says Nana promised to return. Hearing this, Fischl finally seems to understand the deep bond between the two siblings, and with a new resolve, the 7-star stands and picks up his sword, ready for action. With their truce established, Fischl presents a glowing red sword, explaining it was one of Nana's blades and he wants her brother to have it. This trainee accepts the weapon, clearly moved by the gesture, but he still questions if Fischl had the right to take it from the party. Fischl just scoffs, saying he needs no permission to return a hero's belongings to her family. He then slips the kid a card, changing the subject entirely, warning him that he's nowhere near strong enough to investigate Nana's death yet. Fischl even clarifies their earlier fight was just him messing around, a real one would be over instantly. This trainee silently agrees he'd get one shot, so Fischl decides to train him personally since resources are scarce. And with a new fire in his eyes, our boy accepts, ready to finally learn the way of the sword. With the card to a swordsmanship dojo in hand, Nana's brother knows he owes Fischl for this shot, but the 7-star isn't quite finished with him yet, casually dropping the bombshell that Nana's official successor has already been chosen, which immediately gets the kid's full attention as he demands to know who it is. Elsewhere, Kazami rushes into a cafe, apologizing for being late after getting held up by some weirdo, and his friend immediately asks if he's hurt, clearly concerned about the encounter, then points to the news about a knife attack where the victim was apparently targeted on purpose. But Kazami is completely unfazed, just shrugging it off as another weirdo spawned by the existence of dungeons. His friend just sighs, agreeing that life is pretty rough for everyone these days, explorer or not, so he finally asks why Kazami called him, and our boy gets straight to the point. He wants a set of controllable throwing knives. His friend Rue says he can pull some strings to get the gear, but those special throwing knives are a whole other problem. And after Kazami thanks him, Rue reveals he's actually thinking about starting his own guild, which isn't because his business is failing. He just wants to operate without attracting so much unwanted attention, so Kazami immediately tries to recruit him, but Rue instantly shoots that down, wanting to avoid the spotlight entirely, though our boy promises to keep him in the shadows, leaving Rue wondering why he's pushing so hard for this. But their conversation is cut short by a news report showing the 7 stars, and Kazami is shocked to see his brother there, with the broadcast showing Fischl standing beside a serious-looking blonde woman as part of the official lineup, which makes Rue comment that all 7 stars gathering is a huge deal, especially since one was rumored to be dead, leaving him to wonder what kind of major incident could have forced the entire top brass to assemble in one place. While elsewhere, Fischl stares at a portrait of Nana, thinking about her replacement and the innocent person left behind. As Fischl prepares to leave, he tells the trainee this isn't about forcing justice, explaining that being one of the 7 stars is a fate none of them can change. And with a final piece of advice, he tells the kid to get strong enough to stand with them, or risk being completely crushed by his own powerlessness later on. Elsewhere, Rue tries to calm Kazami down about some rumors, but our boy insists he isn't angry, then abruptly asks about someone named Jin, which catches his friend completely off guard. So Kazami just drops it, announcing he's going away for a while, starting tomorrow. And as he walks out, Rue realizes his friend is actually seething with rage. He can't really blame him though, admitting he'd be just as furious if people were gossiping about his brother's death, which cuts to Nana's brother already training at the dojo, leaving the other students wondering why the director brought him in. Turns out our boy has been grinding non-stop, doing 20,000 practice swings every single day, so the dojo's director, Kamada, finally approaches him, noting his physique has already improved, and asks if he feels mistreated for only doing basics. But the trainee just says he trusts the process, which makes Kamada wonder if he's being sarcastic, but the kid is just dead serious about the fundamentals. Impressed, the instructor admits he thought he was just some spoiled brat trying to look cool, offering him the choice to move on to advanced training whenever he feels ready to decide. But our boy doesn't hesitate for a second, immediately asking to begin his real training now. Seeing that unwavering resolve, Kamada's expression gets dead serious, ready to teach him, explaining that the ultimate peak of swordsmanship really comes down to only one thing. And as he says this, he grabs a practice sword from the rack, ready for the first lesson. Kamada starts the lesson by whipping a practice sword right at the kid's head, which our boy barely registers before it smacks him, a brutal lesson in speed. And the instructor just smirks, explaining that unmatched speed beats fancy techniques every time, then challenges the trainee to show him his absolute fastest strike right now. Realizing he completely underestimated the instructor's style, our boy winds up for a full power swing, unleashing a downward slash with every ounce of strength he's built up so far. But Kamada stops the blade dead with just 2 fingers, looking completely unimpressed, casually asking what's wrong as the trainee stands there totally stunned by the power gap. It finally clicks for our boy that true speed is generated by overwhelming power, and Kamada, seeing he gets it, tells him to explain the lesson he just learned out loud. After that brutal lesson, our boy checks his stats and realizes he needs to grind speed, not just power. So when the instructor asks about his style, he explains he's aiming for a balanced, stable approach, which seems to impress Kamada, who praises his patient and humble mindset for a change. But the instructor's expression suddenly shifts, sensing something about this whole situation is a little too convenient, leaving our boy to just assume it's a master swordsman's intuition kicking in. And Kamada wraps things up with some praise, telling him to stay grounded and maybe buy him dinner sometime. Then as he's leaving, he drops a casual warning that some spoiled rich kid is looking for him, which leaves our boy completely confused, since he has no idea who would even be after him. So with that ominous warning hanging in the air, he immediately heads into an E-rank dungeon, already putting that training to use by slicing up monsters with his sister's blade. After clearing out some monsters, he checks the loot and gets a pretty bizarre system notification, with the item description for some mutated meat saying it's edible but also highly toxic and fatal. Our boy is just completely stumped by the system's incredibly unhelpful and contradictory advice, so deciding to ignore it for now, he shatters the dungeon core to clear the instance, but he can't stop wondering why something as basic as monster meat got a special note. It's common knowledge that monster meat is poisonous, a lesson humanity learned the hard way, leaving him to wonder if the system is calling him an idiot, or if this is some kind of hidden hint. Back in the real world, after hitting the shower, he decides to make an important phone call, looking way more built after all that training as he grabs his phone from the table. He gets right to the point, asking his friend Rue if he's free tomorrow because he needs a favor. Rue agrees to the favor, telling his friend to just go be with his wife, and confirms he'll take his spot in tomorrow's dungeon run with a serious look, then glances at a photo of a girl with fox ears, who is clearly his motivation. This next day, he meets the party at the dungeon gate, introducing himself as the replacement, and the leader immediately sizes him up, telling the newbie to just watch and learn. After a quick time check, the leader announces their prep time is officially up, giving the signal for the whole team to finally enter the swirling blue portal. But the moment they step through, the entire party is completely stunned by what they see, finding themselves in a bizarre, ruined cityscape under a blood-red sky instead of a normal dungeon. While the others panic, Rue calmly identifies it as a dangerous hybrid type, warning them to watch their step. Rue explains they've stumbled into a rare hybrid-type dungeon, which mashes different environments together, and he figures it hasn't fully merged yet since only robot-type monsters are spawning. So while the others are on edge, the party leader just tells everyone to start scouting for resources. His teammate quickly reports back that there's absolutely nothing valuable to gather here, and when the leader insists on dismantling junk for parts, Rue calmly points out everything is already empty. Another party member confirms it, checking a nearby rocket and finding it totally stripped clean, which makes the leader wonder why Rue isn't surprised, who explains only the boss drops loot in these places. His leader then spots a huge, motionless robot in the distance, and just assumes it's already been defeated, but it's actually standing over another party that's been completely wiped out by its power, leaving the survivors stunned by a mysterious swordsman who just saved them, questioning if he's really D-ranked. This party leader, acting like a big shot, tells everyone to start gathering resources, thinking they've got this in the bag, while Rue sends another guy to destroy the deployment core, splitting up the tasks like a normal raid. He knows he can't just take all the loot without raising suspicion, but a boss this good is hard to pass up. But before anyone can even move, one of their teammates gets impaled from behind out of nowhere, leaving the entire party completely stunned by the sudden and violent betrayal. This attacker is one of their own, a dude named Kaizuka, who's sporting a ridiculous fake mustache and a psycho grin. This team leader screams at him, reminding him that the guy he just attacked once saved his life. But the imposter just coldly replies he repaid that favor by putting the poor guy out of his misery. Realizing this can't be the real Kaizuka, the blonde spearman charges forward, demanding to know who he is. But the fake Kaizuka just smirks, completely unfazed as the spear tip heads right for his face. This imposter effortlessly deflects the spearman's attack, taking him out of the fight in a single move, then introduces himself not by name but by a number, 19, with a chillingly smug grin, which immediately rings a bell for the party leader, who realizes they're facing a member of Abyss, so he orders his team to find the core while he holds the line, telling them to protect Rue, and Rue just stares back, clearly not on board with this whole heroic sacrifice plan. He immediately questions the leader, asking what's supposed to happen to him in this scenario, but the leader just smiles, saying it's his duty to protect the team no matter the cost. Unfortunately, it seems 19 already dealt with the rest of the party while they were talking, leaving the leader to grab a pickaxe and scream for his last few members to just run, and with a final battle cry, he charges the assassin, who just calls him brave for trying. 19 scoffs at the leader's last stand, clearly disgusted by the whole heroic display, and he brings his sword down for the final blow on the charging party leader, who can only watch in terror as the attack comes right for his head. But out of absolutely nowhere, Rue intercepts the strike, saving the guy at the last second. This actually gets a reaction out of 99, who seems amused to find someone competent in the group, and while the leader yells for Rue to run, our boy just stands his ground, ready for a fight. 19 starts stretching, sarcastically offering Rue time to prepare since he's such a kind villain. But Rue cuts right through the monologue, calmly asking if he's a member of Abyss. This assassin seems a little annoyed he already knows, while Rue thinks something about this doesn't add up, recalling that Abyss is a notorious organization of assassins involved in some seriously shady business. Rue's mind flashes to someone named Nana, his expression hardening for the fight ahead, and he immediately clashes blades with 19, the battle finally starting for real. This assassin seems annoyed that Rue is ignoring his villain monologue, But our boy just stays silent, earning a classic filthy insect insult from the psycho. As they trade blows at insane speeds, the surviving party members are just stunned by Rue's power, so the leader tells his guys to focus on the core, since they can't just rely on the newbie forever. Rue gets pushed back by the force of a blow, digging his sword in to regain his footing, but 19 is already on him, swinging down with a vicious overhead strike. Rue dodges just in time, narrowly avoiding the blade as the assassin presses his advantage, only to get a swift kick right to the face for his trouble, catching him completely by surprise. Rue recovers from the kick, digging in his heels as he prepares for round 2, which makes 19 grin, admitting this fight is finally getting fun. Rue just calmly tells him he should already know how this is going to end, but the assassin retorts that talkative villains are always the first to go, then completely loses his cool when Rue doesn't react, screaming at him to shut up. While they're clashing, the other party members are desperately trying to destroy the dungeon core, and the leader actually manages to shatter it with a single swing of his pickaxe. His teammates start celebrating their escape, completely oblivious to 19 charging right at them. This leader spots the danger, shoving his buddy out of the way and telling him to run, and once again, Rue intercepts the killing blow just in the nick of time. 19's attack comes down hard, but Rue manages to parry it at the very last second, which completely catches the assassin off guard as he takes a nasty hit himself, leaving him genuinely stunned that this supposed newbie actually managed to wound him. Rue doesn't waste the opening, immediately pressing his advantage with a fierce counterattack, and he slams 19 into the ground with a massive overhead swing that shatters the terrain. With the core destroyed and the assassin down, Rue yells for the others to escape now, but the party leader suddenly screams for him to watch his back, because 19 is right there, smugly pointing out he celebrated way too early. Before Rue can even react, the assassin drives his blade right through his back, and as our boy grabs the sword in shock, 19 just whispers that he's the one who let his guard down. Rue desperately tries to yank the blade out of his back, but the assassin holds it firm, and 19 just smirks, telling him it's too bad as our boy realizes he's completely trapped. While the party leader screams for him to run, 19's sword flares with a dark energy, but at that exact moment, the leader himself gets a blade run through his back from behind. 19 just stands there gloating over the fallen leader, which means he wasn't the one who attacked. Rue immediately puts it together, realizing he's up against a rare special type ability user. Turns out, special abilities are the most unpredictable type, breaking all the normal rules of combat, and this one lets 19 create clones, leaving Rue with less than a 10% chance of survival. This real 19 seems genuinely impressed that Rue figured out his trick so quickly, then reveals his clone is already holding the rest of the party hostage, announcing it's showtime. 19's clone puts Rue on the spot, telling him to choose which of the hostages gets to live, and the party members completely lose it, begging for their lives while telling Rue to just save himself. Rue just watches, completely stuck between a rock and a hard place, while the real 19 gives him a 1-minute timer before he just takes out everyone. His eyes dart to the still open dungeon portal, clearly weighing his chances of escape, but 19 immediately warns him not to even think about trying to run for it. This assassin leans in close, whispering that he's watching his every move, which sends the hostages into a full-blown panic, thinking of everything they still have to live for. Rue is sweating bullets, trying to figure out a way out of this impossible situation, as the clone announces he only has 30 seconds left to make his choice. One of the hostages tries to play the hero, telling everyone it's fine to just leave him, but 19's clone just calls his little speech annoying, raising his sword, and immediately silences the guy for good, right in front of his terrified teammates. This remaining party members can only watch in absolute horror at the casual brutality, while the clone complains that their panicked voices are grating on his nerves. That's the last straw for Rue, who finally snaps and yells at him to stop it, but the assassin just smirks, saying he only wants an answer, not their opinions. Rue makes his choice, declaring he'll stay behind if the others are released, which only makes the clone taunt him, asking if he's too scared to actually fight back. He then laughs at Rue's foolish attempt at a deal, calling him out for not taking the easy way out. Rue stares down the clone, pointing out the exit is just a few steps away and daring him to make a move, but the assassin just scoffs at his heroic sacrifice, while the hostages are completely terrified, so Rue calmly calls his bluff, stating that if 19 really wanted them gone, they'd already be gone, and he realizes the whole hostage situation was just a mind game to make them turn on each other. This clone seems pretty annoyed that Rue saw right through the act, admitting a copy has its limits, which is Rue's cue to scream at the others to run while the clone absolutely loses its cool, and the survivors don't hesitate, helping each other make a desperate dash for the portal, with one of them looking back, begging Rue to make it out of there alive. This just makes the real 19 absolutely furious, who now charges in to end this himself, and he brings his sword down for the final blow as Rue braces for the real fight. Rue is immediately pinned down by both the real 19 and his clone, barely blocking their pincer attack, but the 2-on-1 pressure is just too much, letting the clone land a vicious slash across his chest. With his attention split, the real 19 closes in from behind, leaving him no room to breathe, and he's pushed into a desperate defense, parrying a relentless storm of blades from both assassins. Turns out the escaping party members didn't get far, as another clone intercepts and takes them out of the fight. Back with our boy, he's slammed hard into the ground, completely overwhelmed by the numbers game. He looks up in absolute shock, realizing his temporary allies never actually made it out. 19 stands over the last fallen party member, confirming Rue is officially on his own now. This assassin leans in close, smugly taunting him that there's no one left to save him this time. then sends him flying with a devastating kick, ending the exchange with absolute dominance. With no one left to save, Rue is immediately on the defensive against 19's clones, blocking one sword strike only to get a nasty kick from another, already losing the numbers game. This real 19 just scoffs, asking if this is really all the fight he has left in him, sending Rue flying from the blow as he struggles to regain his balance against the relentless assault. Before he can recover, a clone is already on him, declaring this is the end of the line, and lands a brutal slash right across his chest, grinning as he connects the clean hit. This impact sends our boy stumbling back, clearly taking some serious damage from the wound before he's slammed into the ground with enough force to shatter the stone beneath him. Wounded and exhausted, Rue struggles to push himself back onto his feet, only to see there aren't 2 clones anymore. He's now facing 3, all laughing at his defeat. This real 19 is officially done playing games, announcing it's time for some proper punishment, and a clone immediately yanks a battered Rue up by his collar, making it clear he's at their mercy, before tossing him right in front of the dungeon portal with a twisted offer of one last chance, smugly telling him that if he can just crawl into the exit, he'll be allowed to live. With escape so close, Rue's survival instinct finally kicks in, his only thought being to get out alive, and his mind flashes to Nana, giving him a powerful reason to keep fighting for his life. But just as he finds his resolve, 19 puts a boot right on his back, pinning him to the floor, then absolutely loses it laughing, mocking Rue for suddenly wanting to live after acting so tough. And he keeps taunting him about how close the exit is, all while grinding his foot down harder. But even pinned and broken, Rue reaches for the portal, his will to survive refusing to die. Rue is still crawling for the exit, his entire being focused on just making it out alive, but 19 just scoffs at the pathetic display, calling his desperate will to live ugly. His gloating is cut short, however, when a voice from behind politely asks him to move, because a mysterious girl in a hoodie has just appeared, calmly telling him he's blocking her way home. 19 is just annoyed, wondering if he missed a bug, but she simply repeats her request. He gives her a simple, psycho offer. If she can take him out, he'll gladly get out of her way, and when she seems confused, he confirms that's all it'll take for her to leave. After a moment of silence, she finally sizes him up, calling him a very particular kind of person, and with a flash in her eye, she lands on the perfect word for him, a total pervert. This just sends 19 into a fit of maniacal laughter, right before a red line zips across his throat. This assassin is taken out with a single, clean strike, ending the entire fight instantly, and Rue can only stare in disbelief as the psycho, who was just torturing him, collapses. This mysterious girl then turns to our boy, calmly stating she has to kill him now, in order to use the portal, which sounds less like a threat and more like a question, so Rue, completely spent, just tells her he won't get in her way, giving her the all clear, which just leads to a super awkward silence as they both stare at each other, completely confused. She then asks why he isn't moving if he's not going to stop her, clearly getting impatient, so he thanks her for the save, but she points out she didn't help him, so he just asks her name, and she introduces herself as Konatsu before immediately asking if this means he's buying her dinner, which Rue agrees to, but says he needs to stop by home first to patch himself up. With the dungeon behind them, Rue and Konatsu are in perfect agreement on their next move, meat, and it turns out Konatsu has an absolutely bottomless stomach, putting away steak like it's her job, while Rue just watches, probably wondering where she's even putting it all. When the waitress says they're out of steak, he just orders 10 servings of 5 other meat dishes, bringing out a whole new mountain of food for the table, which sends Konatsu right back into a state of pure carnivorous bliss. She keeps chowing down without a care in the world as Rue looks on, amused, but his amusement is cut short when he suddenly coughs up blood from his earlier injuries, prompting Konatsu to finally ask why he's not in a hospital if he's literally dying. Her desperate look reminds him of Nana, who had the same hungry eyes when he first found her. As Rue watches Konatsu inhale her food, she casually asks if Nana was a good person this time. But their meal is interrupted by a huge guy who thought Rue had been tricked again, though he admits he wouldn't mind being tricked if it meant getting a feast like this one. This man introduces himself as an affiliate of an organization called Okumo Takyuka, which Rue recognizes as the Private Explorer Association, inviting the guy to join them. An offer of free food this dude accepts without a single moment of hesitation, immediately diving in and creating an instant food rivalry with a very surprised Konatsu. While Rue looks on, totally overwhelmed, the two food black holes just encourage each other to eat more, so our boy just sighs and tells them to order whatever they want, resigning himself to his fate. This new guy immediately flags down the waitress for 10 more servings, leaving Rue glad he can afford this. With the mountain of food finally gone, both Konatsu and the big guy are completely stuffed and satisfied, so the Kyuka member finally asks for Rue's name, joking if his organization is just a food-eating club, but when Rue introduces himself, the guy's face completely changes. He definitely recognizes that name, and it turns out Rue is famous as Yuke's brother, a face everyone apparently knows from TV, though their conversation is cut short when Konatsu suddenly gets sleepy and says she needs to head home. So without missing a beat, the big guy just scoops her up and offers to take Rue with them, giving our boy a bit of advice about how being too cautious will just leave him isolated, and deciding not to pry. He simply tells Rue to follow if he wants before walking out with Konatsu, leading him to a massive industrial-looking building as the sun sets, which he proudly introduces as the official headquarters for the Kyuka organization. Inside the Kyuka headquarters, a pink-haired woman is just relaxing with a book until the mere thought of meat sends her into a state of pure, unadulterated joy. Right as the big guy walks in with a little girl on his back and a bag of takeout, which he happily hands over to the woman, who looks absolutely thrilled with the delivery. He explains he's staying home while the others are out looking for Kanatsu, who's apparently missing, and inside the bag is a whole roast chicken, making this girl look like she's just seen heaven, which, as it turns out, was bought by Rue, who didn't want to show up empty-handed. This woman, Yukine, eyes him suspiciously, asking if they've met somewhere before, then suddenly gets right in his face, her expression turning deadly serious in an instant. But after a tense moment, she just dismisses it, saying he reminds her of his sister. This big guy finally drops the bomb, revealing the genius who stole Rue's position was his sister, Nana, and Yukine immediately connects the dots, asking if he's really the famous Nana's brother. Rue's surprised she recognizes him too, but she just explains he's basically a celebrity, which he scoffs at, seeing himself as nothing more than a freeloader living off his sister's fame. She tells him how Nana was always the kindest one, never getting angry no matter what people said, until someone made the fatal mistake of mocking Rue, which instantly flipped a switch in her. And that guy was taken out mid-sentence, teaching everyone that her brother is her absolute berserk button. Rue just quietly takes this in, clearly thinking about his sister and their past, before he cuts them off, demanding to know why they really brought him here instead of sharing stories. This big guy just shrugs it off, saying he's jumping to conclusions and is way too cautious for his own good. Yukine calls him out, saying Nana always described him as a kind person, but he's nothing like that at all, and the big guy agrees, admitting he also saw Rue through a filter before realizing how wary he really is. But Rue is completely over it, cutting them off to say it's not their place to judge who he is, which just gets a smile from Yukine, who offers some advice out of respect for his sister, telling him to think about what really made Nana so strong, because hatred alone won't get him there. So Rue just thanks her for the advice and immediately turns to leave, ignoring his injuries, and when they ask, he coldly tells them he'll just heal himself before walking out the door. After he's gone, Yukine asks her friend why he even bothered messing with Rue in the first place, and it turns out the big guy just wanted to cheer him up, insisting he's not actually an idiot, leaving Yukine to open the takeout, sighing that it's been a while since Kanatsu got to eat her fill. This big guy admits he was just trying to keep Yukine from getting into a bad mood, explaining he first thought Rue was using meat to manipulate Kanatsu for her abilities, but he realized Rue was genuinely kind, and being Nana's brother meant he had to bring him back. He then brings up how Yukine was once the top candidate to succeed Nana as a leader, and knows she never resented her. In fact, she adored Nana so much she completely shut down after her death. Turns out that's the real reason he brought Rue over, hoping it would help Yukine connect with Nana's family. Yukine just gets flustered and tells him to mind his own business, but he just laughs it off. Meanwhile, Rue is just walking through the city alone, still nursing his injuries from the dungeon, and he stops outside a bakery, watching some kids who can't afford the cakes inside. When seeing a brother point out a treat for his sister, sends him right back into a painful memory of Nana. This memory hits him hard, flashing back to a young Nana promising to get rich and give him everything, and he remembers patting her head as she vowed to become the strongest just to make him happy. This just twists the knife, reminding him of Yukine's words about how different he is now, and our boy realizes everything has gotten completely backwards since she's been gone. Sitting alone in a park, he reflects on his desperate quest for strength to uncover the truth about her death, realizing in just a few months he's seen the absolute worst of people through endless schemes and conspiracies. Not to mention constant betrayals, though he admits there are still good people fighting for each other. Under the stars, he's just lost in thought, trying to process everything that's happened to him, his expression hardening as he tries to figure out what his next move should even be, until a memory of Nana appears, practically yelling at him for overthinking the whole situation. This memory of Nana continues, calling him out for being way too passive and overthinking things, and she gets straight to the point, asking if he's just completely stopped trusting people. Back in the present, Rue quietly admits that after everything he's been through, he probably has, but his sister's memory argues that even though he's seen the worst, not everyone is bad. With a fiery look in her eyes, she declares her dream to change the entire world for the better, insisting that if more people were like her, they could bring peace, so he needs to be brave too. Rue just sits there in silence, letting her incredibly optimistic words sink in, before grabbing his head in total frustration, hating how this world is full of nothing but schemes. He realizes all the betrayals have forced him to treat everyone with suspicion and distrust, and looking at a photo of Nana, he worries he'll become a disgusting person if he stays on this path. Still thinking about his sister, Rue scoffs at her dream of changing the world, admitting to himself that he absolutely hates this reality without her in it. He's disgusted by all the scheming and betrayal he's seen since she died, but for her sake, he decides to try believing in humanity again, his resolve hardening. A desolate, rundown slum where people are struggling just to survive. He's being led by a younger guy who seems to know the area well, and this kid stops him, putting a hand on his shoulder to get his attention, asking if he's surprised to see a side of the world he never knew existed. When the kid apologizes for the grim tour, Rue just tells him he did nothing wrong. While walking through the slums, a little kid suddenly bumps right into Rue, who catches him just in time, telling the boy to be more careful. This kid is immediately starstruck, asking if the outside world is as cool as he is, and Rue just quietly agrees, while his guide watches the interaction from behind. This little guy is full of hope, asking if he can be like Rue when he's finally allowed to leave at 15, so Rue gives him a reassuring pat on the head, telling him he'll get there someday. Just then, the kid's mom calls out for him, forcing him to say a quick goodbye, and he runs off down the street, waving back at them as he goes. Rue just watches him leave with a heavy expression, clearly lost in thought, so his guide tells him it's not his fault before leading him toward their destination. His guide leads him to a grim, walled-off facility that looks more like a prison than anything else, telling Rue to take a good look, because what's inside is the real reason they're here. As the kid peers through the gate, his face drains of all color at the sight within, a scene straight out of a nightmare, filled with emaciated people just wasting away in the ruins. He immediately realizes this place isn't just a slum, it's a literal hell on earth for these poor souls, and he asks who could possibly be managing this horror show, but Rue just warns him to stay back. This guy doesn't react fast enough, getting a serious jump scare from the gate, as one of the starving men lunges through the bars, barely missing him thanks to Rue yanking him away. Completely shaken, the kid can only stare in shock at how close he came to getting grabbed, while the desperate man just keeps reaching, his only thought a primal, agonizing plea for food. Rue looks on coldly, asking who could possibly be in charge of this nightmare, while one of the starving men wonders if it's the Association or the Seven Stars. But Rue knows the truth. A place this far gone isn't managed by anyone at all. After getting away from the chaos, he and his guide sit down on a nearby bench, where the kid asks what he thinks now that he's seen the ugly side of their world. Rue just sits there, completely stunned into silence by the whole experience, admitting he knew the world wasn't perfect, but never imagined this level of suffering existed. He asks if he's just naive, but his guide reveals Nana actually used to live here. And while he agrees Rue is naive, he says it's not his fault for being sheltered. This kid then breaks down the country's structure, explaining it's divided into zones based on value. His guide explains the last, most valuable zone has no official name, but everyone has a nickname for it, a place they ominously refer to as the graveyard, a desolate wasteland of broken stones. When the kid asks if people are really locked up in there, Rue tells him to ask his own brother for the truth, leaving him with a final warning to think carefully after he gets his answer before walking away. 3 days later, we cut to a luxurious mansion where a sharply dressed man enters a room, and he flips on the lights to find his younger brother, our guide, just sleeping in bed. This older brother sarcastically asks if this is some new form of rebellion, but the kid just says he took long enough, revealing he's been waiting in his room for 3 whole days just for this conversation. Completely over the drama, his brother just opens a closet and tells him to spit out what he wants, so the kid finally asks why people are trapped in the graveyard, explaining he saw the hellish conditions himself. His brother listens to the question, revealing a back covered in some absolutely brutal scars, before bluntly stating that the people locked away in the graveyard are all criminals. He explains they're just opportunists who took advantage of the chaos when dungeons first appeared, and when the kid asks if their punishment is too cruel, his brother just scoffs at his naivety, dropping the hard truth that their actions led to over 1,500 deaths in their city alone. Still trying to understand, the kid asks why no one helps the people in the slums next door, and his brother coldly tells him that no one hates the people in the slums more than each other. This triggers a flashback to 27 years ago, showing people trapped behind bars, begging to be freed, but outside, a mob of regular citizens isn't asking for justice. They're demanding executions. This crowd screams that people like that don't deserve to live, insisting they should all be killed. This brother's story continues in a flashback where a little girl asks her mom why those people are locked up, and her mother just spits that it's because they're nothing more than trash. He explains it all started 30 years ago, on the day the dungeons first descended upon the world, and while everyone else panicked, these criminals saw the chaos as a golden opportunity. As innocent people begged for their lives, these opportunists just added to the body count, fully embracing the anarchy with a twisted "if we die, you die with us" mentality. This flashback even shows a young girl, likely Nana, forced to fight for her life in the middle of the carnage, leaving her completely traumatized, just a kid doing whatever it took to survive. This scene then cuts to the present, dropping us inside a fiery D-rank dungeon, swarming with monsters, where Rue stands at the entrance, finally seeing what a real dungeon looks like up close. Turns out this dungeon is a recreation of the world's chaotic past, just with monsters subbed in for people, and Rue steps into the fiery landscape, recognizing it as the era right after the dungeons first appeared. This place is pure anarchy, filled with creatures that look suspiciously like humans who've gone full beast mode, and one of them immediately charges forward, screaming for his head. But Rue just sidesteps the attack and effortlessly cuts it down without breaking a sweat. Of course, 3 more of them instantly pop up to take its place, surrounding him completely so he wastes no time, cleanly dispatching one with a single brutal strike. This rest of the mob gets the exact same treatment as he carves a path straight through the chaos, and after clearing the grunts, he spots what looks like the dungeon boss looming in the distance over a fallen person. He realizes the boss already took someone down, and that familiar face on the ground has him wondering who it is. He's stunned to realize this dungeon has a save function, which explains all the defeated challengers, meaning it never resets until cleared, making him wonder just how strong the boss really is. But the fallen person isn't out of the fight. It's a kid with terrifying eyes who starts to stir, and their first word isn't a plea for help, but a simple, chilling command for Rue to die. With a feral scream, the kid suddenly launches themselves forward in a wild attack, forcing Rue to parry a surprisingly vicious strike from the unhinged challenger. At that exact moment, the actual dungeon boss decides to get involved, winding up a heavy swing, but the kid just acrobatically flips away, dodging the boss's attack completely. Turns out this kid isn't on anyone's side, screaming bloody murder as they go after the boss now. bringing their weapon down in a frenzy, turning this into a chaotic three-way brawl. Rue immediately pins the feral kid to the ground, completely shutting down their wild assault, and with a cold look, he declares that everyone in this chaotic dungeon should just be wiped out. But this kid is apparently unkillable, springing right back up for another round of pure insanity, forcing Rue to dual-wield just to parry the flurry of attacks from this pint-sized blender. At that exact moment, the entire mob of monsters decides to swarm them both at once, pushing Rue and the feral kid into an impromptu chaotic team-up against the horde. This kid seems to be having the absolute time of their life, grinning like a maniac through the carnage, though this alliance lasts all of 2 seconds before they try to stab Rue in the back. Rue just responds with a massive spinning slash, clearing out some much-needed breathing room, and the two of them end up fighting side by side, a whirlwind of blades carving through the monsters. This feral kid's betrayal pays off, landing a cheap shot right into Rue's side, and they follow it up with a massive explosion that blasts away all the surrounding monsters, leaving Rue to stumble back, clutching a nasty new wound on his chest, and he's horrified to realize the kid's blade was coated in a fast-acting poison. He glares down at the feral kid, wondering if that was a calculated move or just blind luck, but knowing the poison is deadly, he raises his sword to end this fight right now, when he's suddenly hit with a vision of his sister Nana, crying and asking if he'll kill her too. This memory completely freezes him in his tracks, his attack stopping dead, as his sister asks him why, questioning if just wanting to live is really such a crime, before her expression softens, and she just weakly asks him for help. This vision of his sister continues, her face twisted in a desperate plea not to die, but Rue just coldly asks if that's what she told all her victims before taking them down, deciding that from now on, he'll be the one handing out the antidotes in this world. And with that, the feral kid dissolves into loot, dropping some very peculiar items. He's completely baffled by drops like an unsent letter and a tear of resentment, so he decides to check them later and just walks away from the scene, only to trip over something unexpected, catching him completely off guard. Because the actual dungeon sauce is also dissolving into a pile of loot right before his eyes, dropping a mysterious skill book and leaving him wondering if there were 2 bosses all along, and now he's trying to figure out why they'd fight each other, or if this is just how real dungeons work. This dungeon starts to destabilize around him, making him wonder if he's just hallucinating, but a portal rips open right in front of him, offering a much-needed escape from the chaos. This second he's out, a system warning pops up, letting him know he's drawn some serious unwanted attention. We then cut to 4 days later where someone is on the phone, clearly worried about Rue's condition. It's his young guide, who arranges to drop by and check on him later that afternoon, and as he walks into the room, he's shocked to see Rue is finally standing up, leaving the kid absolutely thrilled that he's finally awake after being out for so long. Rue, however, is completely disoriented, groggily trying to get his bearings after the ordeal. He asks where he is, and the kid calmly explains that he's safe inside his house. Turns out the guide found Rue collapsed at his place and brought him here to recover. Rue finally comes to, asking how long he was out, while the kid apologizes for bringing him here, and he learns he was unconscious for 4 whole days, with the guide wondering how he got hit by a lethal poison, adding that the doctor said he would have died if he hadn't been found in time. This kid quickly changes the subject, asking if Rue ever finished setting up that guild he mentioned, and Rue confirms it's ready, but then asks why the guide is helping him so much, guessing it's because he has something the kid lacks, and pointing out his brother probably has it too. This guide looks down, admitting he's painfully aware of that fact, before confessing he's sick of just being known as the second son of his famous family, explaining he's done living like a parasite and wants to finally stand on his own, revealing that seeing Rue's sheer refusal to give up in that dungeon is what inspired him. This guide lays it all out, admitting he's sticking around because he wants to leech some of that OP energy, so Rue just deadpans, asking if the kid honestly thinks he's some kind of idiot. And after the kid tearfully agrees, Rue surprisingly calls that brutal honesty a good thing. He even gives him a little pep talk, saying not to underestimate himself because he has potential, then finally reveals he was in a dungeon and that his new guild will be called Jurai. This guide is absolutely floored that Rue soloed a dungeon, completely forgetting he almost died doing it. Thinking Rue is finally opening up, the kid eagerly asks what rank the dungeon was. But a sudden phone call completely cuts off the conversation before he can get an answer. Taking the hint, the guide offers his number and says he'll go grab some medicine for him, leaving Rue alone to stare at a picture of Nana, promising her it won't be much longer. Back at the guide's place, Rue finally checks his dungeon loot, getting info on each of the strange items, and he decides to start with the unsent letter, curious about what kind of story it could possibly hold. It's a heartbreakingly normal letter from a kid, written right before the world went to hell, just a sad reminder of a normal life that was suddenly cut short, making him wonder if this lingering regret was the source of that feral kid's insane will to survive. Next up is the Tear of Resentment, which basically acts as a massive aggro pull for any dungeon, and he holds the tear, thinking about how simple and powerful a grudge can be. It's a high-risk item for sure, but he can already see how it could be incredibly useful in the right situation, before finally checking the invitation or an item that lets him summon any target directly to him inside a dungeon. He realizes this thing lets him bend the rules, essentially summoning powerful allies straight to his side. He realizes this invitation item is a total game changer for clearing dungeons far beyond a simple escape plan, and as he picks it up, his mind races with the possibilities of summoning literally anything he wants, which leads him to a pretty wild thought. Could this thing even bring back the dead? His gaze falls on the picture of Nana and he wonders if he could actually summon her, a desperate hope lighting up his face as he considers the impossible might just be possible. Fired up, he jumps to his feet, ready to test this theory right here and now, only to immediately slam his foot into the coffee table, a truly graceful start to his master plan. This pain snaps him back to reality, making him realize he can't even see spirits, so summoning her would be pointless. With that, he decides to grind dungeons for a spirit-seeing item, or maybe have his guide check the auction house. But since the auction costs a fortune, he eyes the skill book from the dungeon, wondering if he should sell it for cash. He weighs selling the skill book for cash, but figures the risk of drawing attention isn't worth it, and after a moment of thought, he decides there's a much better use for it than just selling it off. So with a new plan in mind, he resolves to just learn the skill for himself instead. He crushes the book right there, absorbing its power in a brilliant flash of golden light, and a system window immediately confirms that he's successfully learned whatever was inside. 2 days later, his guide is standing by a dungeon portal, asking Rue if he was serious on the phone, because Rue just showed up in full gear, confirming he's about to solo this thing, much to the guide's horror. Rue just calmly reassures the guy he wouldn't joke about this, which doesn't seem to help at all. This guide connects the dots, realizing this is why Rue was scouting support teams earlier, but he isn't buying the excuse that it was just for observation, knowing Rue is way too sharp for that. Rue comes clean, admitting he was only scouting support teams to get a feel for the game, and after the guide accepts his story, Rue confirms that's the honest truth. Taking him at his word, the guide opens up a private, D-rank dungeon portal just for him, then waves off Rue's thanks, suggesting he join a major guild for more consistent access. Rue insists this is more than enough before asking where the guide's own party members are, prompting the guide to check his watch and say he needs to head out for other business. But just as he's about to leave, he casually asks when Nana is coming back, and Rue just gives a vague, dismissive answer about her being busy these days. This guide tells him to treat her to a meal when she returns, and the two say their goodbyes, leaving Rue to stand alone before the portal, his friendly facade completely dropping. With his mind made up, Rue declares he's going to bring Nana back, and he steps into the portal, determined to succeed even if he only recovers her remains. He arrives to find a hellscape filled with a mix of demonic creatures and skeleton warriors, a full-blown apocalyptic city under a rain of fire and lightning, which makes him question if this is really a D-rank dungeon at all, since dungeons this low are only supposed to have a single monster species. This entire mixed horde immediately spots him and charges forward to attack, forcing him to dive straight into a chaotic melee against the swarm. He shatters one of the skeletons with a powerful kick, making some room to breathe, but he immediately notices some of the skeletons are wielding daggers, suggesting they're a different class. He's immediately swarmed by the horde, forcing him to carve out some space with a wide swing, but the sheer numbers are too much, and a demon lands a nasty blow right to his side. That hit clearly rattles him, and he coughs, feeling the impact ripple through his body, putting him on the defensive as he dodges a club while tripping another monster with his sword. He immediately capitalizes on the opening, sinking his blade into the demon's back, but there's no time to celebrate as two more close in for the kill, so he ducks under their attacks, cleanly taking out a skeleton warrior at the knees. Without missing a beat, he pivots and slices through another skeleton's torso, then continues the fluid motion to deal with an axe-wielding demon. Finishing his combo with a heavy kick that sends the last one flying, he goes absolutely berserk, carving his way through the seemingly endless swarm of monsters, and a single spinning attack clears out the immediate area, leaving a trail of defeated enemies. But even after all that, he's barely made a dent and is already starting to feel the strain. Standing in the fiery aftermath, he confirms this is absolutely not the D-rank dungeon he signed up for. After finally clearing the wave, he gets to work looting the bodies, collecting a mountain of materials, and the system shows a massive haul, but one item catches his eye, a rare bone limited to 1 per clear. That specific wording makes him pause, wondering if it means he can only get 1 per dungeon run, which is a completely new concept, since dungeons have always been one-shot clears until now. He realizes if he's reading this correctly, this dungeon can actually be farmed multiple times, and as he pulls his sword free, he wonders if the fundamental rules of the world are starting to shift. Rue tries to make sense of this farmable dungeon, wondering if the game just got a silent update, because everything humanity thought they knew about these places might now be completely outdated. Just then, he spots a fight breaking out in the distance, pulling his attention, where a tiny fox creature is absolutely styling on a group of red demons, and this little fluffball is putting up a surprisingly vicious fight all on its own. This scene reminds him of the Feral Kid, making him wonder if this is another real dungeon feature, which would be a massive game changer if monsters have started fighting each other. Unfortunately, his optimism fades as the demons quickly gang up on the little guy, who lets out a terrified squeak as it's finally cornered, right before a massive demon moves in to crush it for good. Just as the big demon moves in for the final blow on the cornered fox, this little creature turns to Rue with a desperate cry, pretty much begging for help, so he steps between them, shielding the fluffball from the entire charging demon squad, and with one clean swing, he effortlessly clears out all the attackers in a single move. His reward for this heroism is the fox immediately latching onto his leg, much to his annoyance, but the little thing refuses to let go, just staring up at him with big teary eyes, which suddenly reminds him of Nana making the exact same heartbreaking face, since that memory is enough to make him pause and just sigh in resignation. In the background, the dungeon continues to self-destruct as another building collapses, leaving Rue standing over the fallen demons with his new, very persistent sidekick. With the small fry handled, Rue just picks up the little fox, completely unimpressed by his new fan, and promptly yeets the creature away, telling it to scram since he's already spared its life once. He can't believe he's getting soft, but the fox immediately comes running right back to him anyway, which is when his attention is drawn to a new challenger appearing in a fiery arena, a caped, horned skeleton warrior who is very obviously this dungeon's final boss. This boss radiates pure menace, its glowing red eyes locking onto its next target, and Rue immediately feels the pressure, a shiver running down his spine from the sheer power difference. But with his clingy new sidekick in tow, he readies his sword for the inevitable fight, as the boss makes the first move, charging across the arena to meet him head-on, and their blades clash with enough force to send sparks flying, kicking off the boss battle. Rue parries the initial strike, but the boss's raw power is clearly on another level, and the skeleton warrior immediately presses the attack, forcing him into a defensive exchange, knocking our boy off balance with a swift kick right to the chest, before following up with a heavy punch that sends him flying across the arena. Rue hits the ground hard, completely outmatched in this first clash of strength, and as he recovers, he realizes this monster can morph its body into weapons, a far more advanced tactic than anything the regular mobs were using. Still, he's not impressed, figuring skeleton types are fundamentally weak anyway, but the boss immediately challenges that theory with another aggressive lunge, catching his sword hand and completely neutralizing his main weapon. Straining against the boss's grip, Rue realizes he's completely outmatched in raw strength, and gets absolutely launched across the arena after the skeleton king overpowers him. But he's back on his feet in an instant, swinging his blade right at the king's neck, landing a solid hit that lodges his sword deep into the bone, which is a problem, because this skeleton is apparently built like a reinforced bunker, leaving Rue genuinely confused how a pile of bones can be this ridiculously tough. This little mistake leaves him wide open for a brutal counterattack, as the boss slams the ground, sending a wave of bone spikes shooting his way. Just as he braces for impact though, a system notification suddenly pops up, announcing the Skull King has entered Phase 2, and this fight just got a whole lot worse. He's suddenly hit with a memory of Nana explaining how dungeons are nothing like games, because unlike video game bosses, real monsters go all out from the very beginning, and she was just glad he wasn't involved in such a dangerous world. Back in the present, the Skull King finishes its transformation, radiating a new, menacing aura. But as it lunges forward to attack, Rue is already on the move, easily dodging a strike that seems way slower than anything it threw before. And he effortlessly weaves through the bone spikes now erupting from the ground, which is when he notices something completely unexpected about the boss's new form. Its second phase has exposed a glowing, vulnerable core right in its chest, giving Rue the perfect once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to end this fight for good. With the boss's weak point wide open, Rue sees his chance to end this, so he easily sidesteps the telegraphed overhead swing and moves in for the kill, aiming straight for that glowing core, which is when the boss pulls a fast one, firing its back spikes like a porcupine. Rue's caught completely off guard by the ranged attack, forced to deflect the bone barrage, but one of the spikes slips past his guard and skewers him right in the shoulder. Turns out the whole exposed core thing was just a classic bait and switch, and the Skull King immediately presses its advantage, charging in while Rue's injured. But our boy isn't going down that easy, pushing through the pain for a desperate counter, and manages to drive his blade deep into the boss's skull with everything he's got. His desperate stab only manages to crack the skull, leaving his sword hopelessly stuck inside, and Rue is completely stunned, realizing his all-out attack barely even scratched the thing. So before he can even process it, the Skull King grabs him by the arm, promptly yeeting him across the entire arena like he weighs nothing at all. As he recovers, he sees the boss's bones are already shape-shifting, which is just unfair. And with his own ribs damaged, he wonders if he even has a chance to win this fight, to which his inner monologue gives him a very encouraging answer: absolutely none. As the boss winds up for a final blow, he considers using his trump card, but he immediately decides against it, dodging out of the way at the last second, because he's absolutely determined to reclaim Nana's sword, no matter what it takes. This Skull King unleashes a flurry of attacks, completely overwhelming Rue's single blade with its bone arsenal, and he gets sent flying, disarmed and crashing hard onto the arena floor, leaving him totally vulnerable as the boss looms over him for the final blow, which comes in the form of a brutal stomp that pins him right to the ground, followed by the boss summoning a whole barrage of bone spikes to finish the job for good. And with nowhere to run, Rue can only brace for the inevitable end, when suddenly his little fox sidekick leaps in front of him with its eyes glowing red, actually managing to land a surprise hit right on the Skull King's jaw before it suddenly transforms, growing huge to block the boss's next attack. But the bone spikes still fly true, skewering the little guy mid-air as it tries to protect him. Seeing his fluffy little meat shield get skewered sends Rue into an absolute rage, and he immediately gets back on his feet, grabbing the hilt of Nana's sword, ripping it free from the Skull King's head with a final desperate pull, before bringing it down with everything he has, completely shattering the boss's skull. With the skeleton finally down for the count, Rue is left totally exhausted, and he asks the wounded fox if it feels like it's repaid the favor yet. This system rewards him with some loot for his trouble, but he's looking pretty rough, which is confirmed by a new pop-up warning: he'll bleed out in 30 minutes. He coughs up blood, realizing the dungeon core still hasn't appeared, and now he's wondering just how many more stages this nightmare dungeon has left. Rue looks at the loot he got, wishing he had a way to save his little sidekick, who's lying on the ground looking just as beat up as he is after that fight. He kneels down to thank the fox for its help, but admits he's out of healing items, gently patting its head as he tells it to survive on its own from now on. and the little guy seems to understand him completely, which is definitely not normal, because Rue suddenly remembers Nana saying that high-rank monsters can understand humans, making him wonder what kind of insane A-rank dungeon this actually is. Before he can think too hard, the fox suddenly cries out to get his attention, and then picks up one of the Skull King's bones from the ground, before it starts chewing on it, and a green healing aura immediately surrounds the little guy. Rue realizes the fox is healing itself by eating one of the boss's bones, a white jade bone, and he asks if that's really all it takes, getting an enthusiastic nod in return, which is when it clicks that this creature can somehow see his system's skills. So to test it, he points to his own timer warning that he's about to bleed out. This fox immediately panics, confirming it can read his private notifications, which is just bizarre, and now that it's fully healed, the little guy suddenly takes off running, stopping just ahead to make sure Rue is actually coming with it, leading our boy to realize his new sidekick wants to show him something. He decides to trust it, following the fox through the dungeon's fiery ruins until they reach a new area where some kind of glowing flower is waiting for him. This fox suddenly cries out, leading him toward a glowing object tucked away in the ruins, and Rue follows its gaze to find a strange green orb just sitting on the ground. He kneels down to inspect it, wondering what exactly his new sidekick has found, which turns out to be some kind of glowing green crystal, clearly an important dungeon item. This little guy then nudges the orb over to him, insisting that he take it. Rue picks it up, and as he examines the strange item, a system window pops up, revealing it's a bonfire castle save that lets him re-enter the dungeon in about a week. He's completely baffled, asking the fox how it managed to find something so valuable, but with no real answers, he just gives the little guy a sincere thank you for the help. Deciding to call it a day, he activates the exit prompt, hoping they'll meet again someday. As he prepares to leave, the fox suddenly clutches the save point, refusing to let him go, and Rue realizes the little guy actually wants to come with him, right as the exit prompt is up. He takes a moment, clearly weighing the pros and cons of adopting a dungeon monster, before breaking the bad news that dungeon creatures can't survive in the outside world. This, of course, immediately turns on the waterworks, with the fox looking absolutely heartbroken, and Rue tries to explain that taking it along would literally be a death sentence. But the fox just keeps staring back with those big, impossibly persuasive eyes. This whole scene triggers a memory of Nana pulling the exact same face to get more ice cream, which is apparently super effective, because he caves, telling the fox it can come at its own risk. So with his new, ridiculously cute sidekick perched on his shoulder, Rue finally activates the exit portal. He confirms the exits, deciding to take his chances with the little guy in the real world, and a pillar of purple light immediately teleports them both out of the fiery dungeon, dropping them back in the city, though a system warning clarifies that escape skill now has a year-long cooldown. Rue wakes up on a couch, looking like he went 10 rounds with a truck, but somehow still smiling, only to reveal he's actually passed out, with the little fox sleeping peacefully on his chest. He suddenly jolts awake, grabbing his phone to frantically call someone named Yasakage for a doctor, which startles the fox, who looks up at him with pure concern. Rue's just relieved to see it, genuinely shocked the little creature survived the trip outside the dungeon, but the fox, now wearing a tiny bell, seems way more worried about him. Which is fair, because Rue immediately drops his phone and passes out cold again. Sometime later, Rue wakes up in a proper room looking out at the city skyline where his friend Yasakage has been keeping a close eye on him while he recovers. The second his eyes snap open, his first thought is about his new companion, and he immediately tries to tell the little fox to hide before anyone spots it, but Yasakage is already rushing over, scooping up the terrified creature with a huge smile. Rue is completely baffled, realizing his friend somehow can't even see the fox he's holding, so he quickly plays it off and just says he's hungry to avoid any weird questions. Happy to help, Yasakage heads out to warm up some food, leaving them alone for a minute. With the coast clear, Rue checks on his little sidekick to make sure it's not hurt, before gently asking the tough question of where it plans to go from here. Still confused why the fox wants to tag along, Rue decides to just roll with it, and since it's sticking around, he figures he might as well give the little creature a name. Thinking Nana would have loved a partner, he settles on the most creative name ever, P, which the newly named P seems to love. Right as Yasakage walks in with some food, Yasakage brings a tray over, completely oblivious to the magical fox sitting right on the bed, and even manages to set the tray leg right on P's tail, making the poor thing yelp, which just leaves Yasakage confused about what he stepped on, confirming he can't see it at all. Changing the subject, Yasakage tells Rue he needs to rest after losing so much blood, then brings up the obvious, asking why Rue insists on soloing dungeons instead of partying up. Rue mentions someone named Jirai is doing okay, but admits people are already sniffing around. Rue's confused why people are sniffing around, but Yasakage points out their recent success is basically a giant neon sign, so he asks to start recruiting members, wanting to help people who are struggling to find work outside of dungeons. And when Rue asks what he has in mind, Yasakage lays out his entire business plan, which involves opening their own shops to create jobs instead of just selling materials in bulk, casually mentioning their new headquarters is almost ready, which is a complete surprise to Rue. And it turns out he's already picked a location, dead set on expanding their operations, getting fired up about not wanting to rely on Rue for everything, before quickly clarifying he's just worried about Rue getting hurt so often, which is a fair point, so Rue gives him the green light, telling him to take the lead and run the guild with confidence. And Yasukage is already brainstorming business ideas from selling info to job placement services. Yasukage continues brainstorming, but rules out information trading since they have no connections, and Rue agrees, admitting they can't exactly ask his brother or the Kazami family for favors. So he tells his friend to take it easy, reminding him they're a new guild with plenty of time, before pivoting to say material sales are also a dead end, which just confuses Yasukage. Rue explains a company called Daisy has dominated the materials market for over a decade, meaning they'd have to sell at a huge loss just to compete with them, and when Yasukage suggests job placement, Rue tells him he's missing the obvious angle, proposing they go through the Adventure Association, which catches his friend by surprise. Yasukage argues the association would have already stepped in if they cared about unemployment, but Rue clarifies it's a thankless job nobody wants, thinking back to how things used to be. Rue explains that while dungeons boosted technology, they also made normal jobs obsolete, which is why unemployment is through the roof, creating a risky market nobody wants to touch. And he immediately pokes a hole in Yasukage's plan, asking why anyone would use a recruiter for backline support, making his friend realize you could just shout on the street and get a mob of desperate adventurers. Even with that obvious flaw, Rue asks if Yasukage is still serious about trying to make it work, and his friend clenches his fists, confirming he's been dead set on this since he came back. He explains that his mission is to give people jobs and a reason to live, feeling it's his purpose now, a surprisingly noble speech that leaves Rue completely stunned for a moment, before he admits his own motives are selfish compared to Yasukage's genuine desire to better the world. Getting that validation makes Yasukage blush, admitting that being acknowledged is a huge deal for him. Yasukage gets so flustered by the praise he asks Rue to repeat it for a recording, which is just adorable, and after telling his friend to go home and rest, Yasukage insists he's perfectly fine staying by his side. That's when he drops a bombshell. The 7 Stars' entire base was just attacked, leaving Rue stunned. Rue immediately asks when this happened, and his friend confirms it all went down yesterday afternoon. Apparently, 3 mysterious figures in black robes showed up at just a place without a word. Thankfully, only a guy named Fischl was there, who managed to hold them off and prevent a total disaster. When Rue asks who did it, Yasukage admits the rumors point to the same group that fought his brother. Rue connects the dots, realizing the Saints are back and making some incredibly bold moves lately. While they drove the attackers off, Fischl was badly hurt, and none of the other 7 Stars even bothered to show up. Rue checks his phone, discovering the entire incident has been scrubbed from the internet and even Explorer networks. Yasukage explains the cover-up was necessary since the 7 Stars are basically humanity's spiritual support system, adding that the attackers even boasted about making the world's strongest guild bend the knee, which is all Rue needs to hear before ordering his friend to create a new intelligence gathering department, demanding all the dirt on every major power and dungeon, asking if Yasukage is up for it. And he even offers to connect him with a secret informant, but warns him to be extremely discreet, giving him the official excuse to tell his brother something vague about dungeon rules. And the sheer weight of this new responsibility seems to hit Yasukage like a ton of bricks. Sometime later, Rue's taking a water break from training with P napping peacefully on his head, when his moment of peace is shattered by a woman suddenly appearing upside down outside the window, who casually informs him that there are just 18 of them waiting, leaving our boy completely speechless. Rue's training is cut short by a woman hanging upside down outside his window, asking if he'll die if she falls, and after letting her in, she says she just wanted to surprise him, but he deadpans that her falling would have been a better one. She gets way too close for comfort, trying to get him to smile, but our boy is having absolutely none of it. While she's commenting on his physique, PI gets territorial as Rue threatens to drop her if she doesn't let go. She gets all dramatic, wondering when he stopped being the cute kid who called her Hima-san and became so cold. This whole exchange somehow ends with her just calling him scum, which is a pretty wild mood swing. Rue just leans into it, retorting that if he's scum, then he has no problem throwing her out the window. Finally getting serious, she suggests they move on to the actual reason she's here, much to his relief. Turns out, she's here on behalf of someone else who was too busy with work to make it himself, revealing her brother, the association's secretary general, is swamped, so she's here to help Rue instead. She clarifies this little visit is strictly off the books, giving him a conspiratorial wink, and points out he's never let her in his house before, wondering about the sudden hospitality. Rue cuts right to the chase, telling her he wants a specific skill book she owns, and when he asks the price, she just wants dungeon info, which seems way too simple for him. So he offers intel on a repeatable dungeon, a piece of information that completely blows her mind. He confirms he's dead serious, but she says that while the info is rare, it's not quite enough for the trade. To sweeten the pot, Ro throws in the secret method for actually entering the dungeon as well, which is the magic phrase that gets her to agree to the deal, no strings attached. With the trade locked in, Ro immediately turns to his new partner for some critical intel, asking Pai if he can even bring other people into that dungeon and how many are allowed. Rue lays out the intel PI gave him. The dungeon is repeatable and can hold up to 8 people, so he offers to take 7 of her people in exchange for 1 skill book per person he brings. She immediately calls him out, saying a deal that good is basically just highway robbery on her part, but Rue flips it, explaining that since he can farm it endlessly, he'll make his money back eventually. 10 days later, Rue and his new party of 7 stand before the massive blue dungeon gate, and the woman is still skeptical, admitting she thought it was just some random D-rank dungeon at first. Our boy just smirks, telling her the only way to find out for sure is to head inside, and with that, he confidently leads the way, stepping right towards the swirling blue portal. This rest of the party is understandably nervous, since a repeatable dungeon is unheard of, but they're also hyped, and when their leader tries to calm them, the whole crew insists on going in together, ready for anything. This woman grins, telling Rue she'll be the one to lead the charge into the dungeon, and the second they step through, they're greeted by a full-blown apocalyptic cityscape on fire, which is absolutely swarming with monsters, forcing her to order her team to split up and handle the mobs. As her crew dives into the fray, she thanks Rue, admitting this was a more than fair trade. He just tells her to get going, but she's a little confused why he isn't joining the fight himself. Rue plays it off, claiming his old injury is still healing and he needs to sit this one out. She teases him a bit before promising to treat him to a meal later, then dashes off into the battle. Our boy watches her tear through the monsters with some serious speed, joining her team in the chaos. Watching from the sidelines, he admits to himself that partying up is just not an option for him. Because if anyone ever found out he could bring actual monsters into the real world, he'd be public enemy number one. He's worried that if his secret gets out, it could cause a global crisis, so he tells Pi to just stay home. But as he gets ready to head out, the little fox is right there on his shoulder, ready for action, and a gentle pat on the head only seems to confuse the determined creature even more. Rao tells Pi to be good while he's gone, leaving it on the couch to watch the house, but the second he turns his back, Pi is right at his heels, refusing to be left behind. Our boy even tries to bribe it with toys and TV, which only makes the little fox angry. So instead, it just latches onto his leg, making it perfectly clear it's not staying put. Defeated, Rue sighs, realizing this is a battle he's just not going to win today, so he picks Pi up, explaining that while humans can't see it, dungeon monsters definitely can. Rue admits he can't guarantee its safety, but Pi just gives him the ultimate puppy dog eyes, refusing to back down. Rue finally caves, telling Pi to run if things get dicey, which the little fox eagerly promises to do, and the moment they're inside the dungeon, a skeleton monster is already down for the count, so while the other party handles the mobs, Rue hangs back, figuring he can just dip out anytime, but he quickly scraps that plan, deciding they're in it to win it, and charges forward with Pi, immediately starting to clear out monsters and collect loot as they pixelate out of existence, while the rest of the team is locked in a massive brawl with a whole army of undead. But as he's looting, something from the main fight catches his eye, making him pause, because a huge red demon has joined the fray and it's absolutely wrecking the hired help, and Pi starts yapping to get his attention. So Rue asks what the little guy is trying to show him. So Pi puts on a whole dramatic performance, mimicking the monster while a clone plays the victim. Pi's dramatic reenactment makes Rue wonder if someone got seriously hurt back there, and he reflects on giving Haim all the intel, trusting she'd bring a competent team, but now he's questioning why Stage 3 suddenly turned into a complete disaster. Deciding to get the details from her later, he steps through the exit portal to head home. Sometime after the raid, a much calmer scene is unfolding at his apartment, where Yasukage just stands there, completely speechless, watching Rue cook in an apron. Our boy asks what's wrong, but his friend is just too flustered to form a sentence, eventually blurting out that Rue looks surprisingly domestic in the kitchen, which earns him a deadpan comeback about whether guys are even allowed to cook. Changing the subject fast, Yasukage confirms he passed the intel to his brother, then asks why Rue didn't just tell the association himself. Rue explains he can't be the one to go public with this intel since it's way too sensitive, and Yasukage adds that his brother didn't react at all, guessing he probably already knew everything. Changing the subject, Rue asks his friend to check in on the Daisy Company for him later, but as they sit down to eat, he notices Pi is acting strangely, staring off into the distance. This little fox is laser-focused on the front door, which immediately puts Rue on high alert. Yasukage asks if he's expecting someone, but Rue says no, clearly sensing something is wrong, and right on cue, the doorbell rings, revealing a mysterious girl with purple hair on his doorstep, who immediately collapses into the apartment begging for help, shocking both of them. A few minutes later, this same damsel in distress is absolutely inhaling their entire dinner, leaving Yasukage to stare in disbelief and ask where he found such a unique acquaintance. Yasukage can't help but laugh at their new guest, who insists she's not naive while inhaling a corn dog, and after she's cleared multiple plates, he asks if she's finally full, but she's nowhere near done yet. Resigned to his fate as a food provider, Rue tells Yasukage to just order a ton of meat for delivery, then asks the girl, Konatsu, what's going on and why her friend Nozomu isn't with her. Turns out another friend broke a motorcycle, so Nozomu's stuck working to pay it off and sent her here for a free meal, revealing her grand entrance was all part of the plan. Just collapse at the door and beg for help. Yasukage immediately calls out the scheme for what it is, basically insurance fraud, leaving Rue absolutely speechless. Our boy has to remind her that his apartment isn't a public restaurant, though it's clearly too late for that, and after she's finally satisfied, he tells her to go ahead and invite Nozomu over too, since he's clearly going through it. But just as things calm down, another dude casually pops in through the window, giving Rue a serious case of deja vu. This window crasher, Nozomu, makes himself right at home while Rue orders a mountain of meat for everyone, and after confirming the delivery, Nozomu jokes about freeloading, prompting Yasukage to ask about his job. Turns out he can't find work and was just planning to mooch, which earns a deadpan stare from Rue. Our boy cuts to the chase, asking why Nozomu's guild Kyoka can't just run dungeons to pay off their debts. Nozomu awkwardly admits his guild probably isn't strong enough for that, which seems to surprise Yasukage. Yasukage then spills the tea. A Kyoka member recently went on a rampage, wrecking trucks in a whole building. This damages are in the billions, and the victims want rare items for compensation, not just cash. Rue points out that Kyoka's lack of a support team makes any serious mysterious dungeon dive a complete roll of the dice. Nozomu complains that because someone named Yukine went too far, they're now completely broke. So Rue tells him to eat up, earning some gratitude and a promise to stop bothering Yasukage's brother. Nozomu is shocked Rue knows his brother, but Rue just plays it cool, saying they're buddies, which completely floors Yasukage, who insists his brother is basically incapable of making friends. So Nozomu clarifies that buddies just means they've been fighting for 5 years straight. Cutting through the weirdness, Rue asks how many members the Kyoka Guild even has, and Nozomu says there are 7 of them, immediately asking if Rue is looking to hire. Our boy decides to table the business talk for now, letting the whole crew demolish the feast he ordered, and once the chaos dies down, Yasukage decides he's had enough excitement for one day and heads out, leaving Rue to get right back to it, officially offering to hire the Kyoka Guild for some dungeon runs. And Nozomu is all in, admitting they're so broke he'll send everyone. But Rue has to find the dungeons. So Rue agrees with one condition, no S-rank dungeons, not because he's scared, but because they're just a pain. Nozomu explains that S-rank dungeons cannot drop rare intel memos, which sounds like a good thing, but turning that info over to the association is a bureaucratic nightmare he'd rather avoid anyway. So they lock in the deal, a 6-month contract for A-rank dungeons and below, with details to follow. With business settled, Nozomu finally decides it's time to head out, apologizing for the chaotic entrance. But Rue stops him, calling him out for secretly investigating him and asking him to knock it off. As a peace offering for the snooping, Nozomu offers up a piece of intel as an apology, warning Rue that Yasukage is drawing way too much attention and needs to be more careful. Meanwhile, over at Yasukage's brother's place, things are decidedly less serious, where the supposedly stoic and friendless brother is just standing in his doorway, looking utterly defeated. Turns out his sister is doing a full-on Jiangshi dance in the living room and he has no idea how to react. Yasukage's brother finds Hime completely wrapped in bandages, asking if she has some kind of death wish, and his first guess is that she got betrayed again, which is apparently a regular Tuesday for her. But she blames it all on some crazy woman named Yukine, explaining she got wrecked in a dungeon, then got even more banged up after running into Yukine's guild brawling on her way to the hospital. So he calmly advises her to maybe not destroy the motorcycle next time she gets into a fight, before asking why she was even in a dungeon to begin with after swearing them off for good, and Haim explains she couldn't pass up the treasure, referencing the deal she made with Rue, still gloating about how getting 10 skill books for a 9-person dungeon run was a massive win. But her brother just bursts her bubble, warning that a huge dungeon rush is coming next month, as the scene cuts to a dark cave where 2 hunters face a monstrous boss, hinting at the chaos ahead. Elsewhere, Rue's newly hired Kyoka Guild is already clearing a dungeon, with one of the members diving right in, effortlessly grabbing a goblin-type monster by the face and slamming it into the floor like it's nothing. In another part of the dungeon, a different monster is perched and ready to attack, but a laid-back archer from the guild already has it trapped in a massive ice spell. With a single shot, he shatters the ice, completely obliterating the creature inside, and Rue gives him a casual wave, confirming the area is clear. This archer boasts that these low-ranked dungeons are a piece of cake, asking when they'll tackle something serious, admitting he's tired of fighting small fry and wants a real challenge, but complains it's a pain just to find dungeons, which completely throws Rue for a loop, since finding dungeons is literally his entire business model. This archer complains about being broke, while Rue internally roasts him for causing his own problems, and after taking out another mob, he decides to drop some unsolicited wisdom on our boy, saying since the pay is good, he'll offer a piece of advice as a freebie. His big tip is that Rue is starting to draw way more attention than Yasukage, which is a bad look. With that cryptic warning delivered, the guy just waves and casually dips through the exit portal, and Rue actually takes it to heart, deciding it's probably time to lay low for a bit. Back at his apartment building, the day's chaos isn't quite over yet, because the second he walks through the door, he's met with a tiny ball of pure rage. PI is absolutely losing its mind, clearly having gotten into a fight while Rue was distracted. So Rue grounds the little fox, telling it there are no more dungeon runs until its fur grows back. Rue tries to console the still sulking PI, who's clearly not over its recent grounding, but his attention is suddenly pulled towards the window with a familiar sense of dread. So he stomps over to check it out, already looking completely done with his day, and sliding it open reveals another uninvited guest hanging upside down from the frame. This guy looks absolutely panicked while Rue just stares, completely unfazed by the ridiculous sight, and before he can even react, a red-haired woman is already inside, blaming him for not locking it, so he just cuts to the chase, demanding to know what she wants this time, and she explains the kid outside got into some serious trouble, forcing them to make a run for it, telling Rue to let him in before he falls and even offering to double the condolence fee. But when he reminds her about the no-window rule, she hits him with some world-class loophole logic. She tries to make some small talk about his attitude, but Rue just cuts right to the chase, and Haim asks if he can change the dungeon slot for Bonfire Castle, which is a pretty big favor, but he immediately shuts her down, reminding her their deal was for someone with actual potential, then correctly guesses she teamed up with the association, which she basically admits to, clarifying that some guy named Yu sold her out, prompting Rue to promise he'll handle him, though he knows something is off since Yu isn't the type to use the window, and Haim knows he hates it, so he explains this was bound to happen. She used Yasukage's brother to leak intel without thinking, knowing full well a guy like Kazami would assume she was using his brother for a scheme, and as she tries to deflect, he calls her out for shifting the blame while already calling a repairman for the window. So Yu calls him an admirable brother, but Rue just fires back that she's the one who tried to use him. Rue calls Haim out for trying to use him to scout Bonfire Castle, but she just plays it off as a test, and Yu adds that her usual cautious strategy is exactly what's trapping her this time around. Haim complains that she's the one risking her life, having just run a dungeon a few days ago, explaining she went in fully prepared, but the difficulty suddenly spiked from A rank to S rank. That massive jump is exactly why she's here. The rewards are huge, but her team is completely stuck. She admits Bonfire Castle is a gold mine, but it's way too much for her guild to handle alone, so Rue reminds her that a treasure you can't reach is basically worthless anyway. As he's talking, he notices Pai is on high alert again, sensing something is definitely off. Right on cue, a loud crash from the window startles the entire group, and they all turn just in time to see it shatter, bracing for yet another uninvited guest. Just as predicted, a colossal dungeon gate tears open right in the middle of the city, and the onlookers are horrified, realizing it's big enough to swallow half the downtown area. As the initial shock wears off, the crowd's confusion quickly turns to pure, unadulterated panic. Authorities desperately try to establish a perimeter, warning everyone that the gate is dangerously unstable, but one guy just snaps, laughing as he makes a mad dash for the portal, convinced it's the end anyway. And even as an officer tries to restrain him, he just screams that they're all toast. Before anyone can react, the portal's energy suddenly flares up, catching the guards completely off guard, and a powerful force starts pulling the panicking man and several officers right into the vortex. This situation gets even worse when a guard realizes the gate is expanding and yells for a full retreat. That's all it takes for the entire street to erupt into a stampede of pure terror. As the entire street flees in terror, Rue's crew stands their ground, staring down the apocalypse gate, and Haim wonders if this is just another case of a dungeon's rules suddenly changing on them. But Yasukage's brother points out a gate expanding after forming is a completely unprecedented disaster. His grim observation earns him a collective deadpan stare from both Rue and Haim, and Rue immediately calls him out for setting off some seriously bad death flags, telling him to maybe not say the things that are actively freaking everyone out. This earns him a comical smackdown from Haim for being so casually pessimistic, but the brother gets serious again, insisting they have to prepare for the worst-case scenario. That worst-case scenario being a swirling vortex of energy threatening to swallow a skyscraper. Rue realizes this isn't a normal dungeon break, but something far, far worse. Yasukage's brother connects the dots, realizing this might be the start of the prophesied dungeon rush, but Haim questions the timing, since the rush wasn't supposed to hit until next month. He just clarifies it's the last day of the month, so the apocalypse is basically right on schedule. Turns out the intel came from an association member with future sight, but the details are completely unknown, and the stakes are simple. If they can't survive this wave, it's game over for everyone. This association's plan was to station its strongest hunters in major cities while hiring guilds for backup, which makes Rue realize why the 7 stars were no-shows before. They knew this was coming all along. With the world literally ending, Haim asks Rue where he's going, and he just says home, which completely throws them off, since they expected a bit more urgency from him. Haim thinks he's changed since someone named Nana died, but his brother insists he's always been this unreadable. Yasukage's brother remembers Rue used to be a total wolf, fighting off anyone who even looked at his sister wrong. But in front of Nana, he'd always play the part of the sweet, harmless big brother, and he thought that act would last forever, until Nana became a 7-star, and Rue just lost his edge, which makes Haim realize that Nana was literally Rue's entire world back then. But now he's a complete lone wolf who doesn't trust anyone, not even them. And she just accepts it, saying as long as he knows his own path, that's all that matters. Before deciding this whole situation is a headache and telling the brother not to drag her into it again. So as he waves her off, the scene cuts to Rue's crew just chilling at an outdoor cafe, where our boy is calmly scrolling through a food delivery app, completely unbothered by the apocalypse, and his friend questions the 17-dish order, but the other guy is just hyped for the leftovers. This Kyoka guild leader is already giving his buddy grief for eating like the world's ending, when Rue himself casually strolls up to their table, looking completely unfazed by the apocalypse, and the whole crew greets him like a rock star, totally oblivious to the citywide chaos. Rue cuts to the chase, but the guild leader just asks to add more food for a friend who eats like a beast, which immediately makes his friend suspicious, asking if this friend is just his hungry alter ego. Rue just sighs and agrees to order more, earning him a big spender comment from the guy, then slides over a bag as a down payment, surprising the leader who thought his call was a joke. With business on the table, the guild leader lays out 2 choices for him. Either Rue spills what he's really after, or he finds a proper backer with some serious cash. Rue's friend thinks they're getting ripped off, but the leader clarifies they're just wary of getting dragged into his schemes. This guild leader's warning is cut short by the arrival of a pink-haired brawler named Yukine, who immediately squares off with a red-haired hunter, and the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. As Yukine charges in, the leader just sighs that Rue is a greedy one, while the rest of the crew is just stunned to see she's even back in the first place. She wastes 0 time, leaping right at the red-haired girl to settle some kind of old score, and comes down with a ground-shattering punch that cracks the entire courtyard. Her opponent barely gets her sword up in time to block the blow, but the raw power of the attack sends her flying backward anyway. She smashes hard into a wall, leaving another guild member completely speechless at the display. Turns out, Rue and his crew are just watching from the spectator seats, casually noting the two always fight on sight. This guild leader just shrugs off the brawl as an emotional reunion, asking Rue's friend if he gets it, then claims to be a man of love and peace, a statement so ridiculous even Rue is left speechless. As the fight rages on in the background, Rue's buddy asks how long this chaos is supposed to last, and the leader casually replies they'll probably stop once the food gets there. Priorities, you know? Seeing his opening, Rue cuts through the nonsense and suggests they finally get down to business. But an older guy at the table points out their representative is currently busy throwing hands. This leader decides to just skip the formalities and lets Rue lay out his demands first, while the older man introduces himself as Rikumichi and the red-haired brawler as Coco from Guild Dead Tomorrow. Rue greets them, but the leader immediately calls him out for speaking so informally to a superior, which just earns him a collective sigh as the whole table devolves into petty bickering. This guild leader tries to play off his attitude as humor, but the rest of the crew is not impressed, so Rue just ignores him and gets straight to business, asking if they know about the dungeon rush. Rikumichi confirms the news is out. Dungeons have already popped up in 14 locations, causing casualties, and explains their boss is already out dealing with it, but he had to stay behind because of a massive debt. Rue lays out the plan. The rush starts in 14 days, and he wants them to clear all local dungeons. He clarifies this is just practical training before the main event, and the leader asks if Yasukage is included. When Rue confirms it, the leader immediately tries to jack up the price, which Rue agrees to. This leader complains Yasukage is too weak, but then dumps the training duty on Rikumichi, who's apparently good with rookies. Yasukage nervously accepts his new mentor, who promises to whip him into shape with a custom training plan, and as they move to a training facility, the leader asks if they have to find the dungeons too, which Rue confirms. This guild leader tries to squeeze more cash out of him for finding the dungeons, but Rue just agrees to pay above market rate without blinking, and Rikumichi adds they probably can't provide any useful intel anyway, which is a fantastic start to any business deal. Rue isn't bothered, asking if they have any other demands, though the leader says it depends on what his brother thinks, so Rue throws out a wild offer. They can keep all the materials dropped in the dungeons, which completely shocks the guy. He immediately gets suspicious, asking if Rue is serious and what kind of scheme he's actually plotting here. This leader realizes the problem must be worth more than any loot, making him feel like he's getting played, but Rue just tells him he can refuse, which of course makes him agree instantly, saying for that kind of money their lips are sealed tighter than steel. Rikumichi is also on board as long as they sign a proper contract since they got cheated on a bad deal before. Rue confirms that's why they're here, explaining he already has the contract and someone waiting to bring it over once the fight outside ends. Then he drops the final perk. He'll also cover all their housing, meals, and medical expenses, leaving the two completely stunned. This guild leader is so impressed by Rue's offer, he's practically ready to switch jobs and work for him, just as a massive food delivery arrives, carried by a driver in a full-on bunny helmet, and the promise of fresh meat is enough to snap even the quietest members to attention, officially ending the brawl between the two girls before any more property damage can be done, which has the leader gloating that he told them a good meal would bring peace to the table, though that peace immediately shatters when Coco threatens to smack him with a chicken leg, earning him a collective deadpan stare from the other girls who are just trying to eat, and the whole meal quickly devolves into a chaotic free-for-all anyway. So much for peace, while Yasukage quietly asks Rue if he's also expected to join this intense training regimen. But Rue shuts him down, explaining that with the dungeon rush so close, only real combat experience matters now. Rue wraps up a quick phone call, telling someone he'll be right there, and when asked who it was, he just says someone named Fischl is coming. This scene immediately cuts to a D-ranked dungeon where a high-speed battle is already underway, while on the sidelines, a red-haired girl paces impatiently, annoying her blue-haired companion, who gets a sharp shut-up for telling her to calm down. When he sarcastically suggests she join the fight, she takes him up on it instantly, and just as she charges in, Rue finds himself in a tense standoff with a blonde woman in a military uniform. Their confrontation is immediately broken up by the red-haired brawler, blasting right between them, and she completely ignores the blonde woman's demands, declaring she's just here for a fight. She then taunts the woman for being in the way before speeding off, leaving her absolutely fuming. Fischl immediately fires a massive energy blast, knocking the red-haired brawler clean off her feet. But Coco is far from finished, roaring that she's just getting started. Meanwhile, Rue and the combat instructor are just watching the chaos unfold from the sidelines, with the instructor calling her a battle junkie, while Rue notes they get along surprisingly well. Turns out he's just trying to avoid her brother's wrath, reminding Rue he's the one who called her here. With the dungeon rush just 2 days away, he asks why she hasn't left, but Rue says she's using unhealed wounds as an excuse. Her instructor sighs that Fischl comes here every day just to pick a fight, which is going to put him out of a job. Rue then calls him out for not knowing the real reason, asking who'd want to go back to a bunch of idiots anyway, explaining her guild is messing with the 7 stars again, and she's here to vent before she throws them all into an S-rank dungeon. This fight ends with Fischl telling Rue he's stronger than Coco, who's now just a dizzy mess on the ground. This combat instructor tries to get Fischl to chill, joking that her power would turn the desert into a swamp, but when he asks for details on what's bothering her, she just scoffs that he's not important enough to know. He points out Rue is also listening, so Rue asks why a 7-star is ditching her post with the rush coming. He figures she must have a good reason to abandon her duties, since she's not the type to just flake out. Fischl drops a bombshell. The association knew about the rush for 3 months, but kept it secret from everyone, even the 7-stars. This implies some serious infighting at HQ, and she confirms that most of the other top hunters are still in the dark. Rue immediately connects this to the upcoming selections, and she reveals the association thinks a tournament is more important than the apocalypse. Her instructor sarcastically notes that this sounds exactly like something the big shots would do, earning him a sharp shut up. Our boy recalls that this tournament determines who gets control over the country's dungeons, a prize worth billions. Fischl is stunned he knows that much, realizing the association's shady priorities are now crystal clear. Fischl is fuming that the association is treating the tournament like a PR stunt, even trying to use the 7-stars as glorified babysitters for rookies, which prompts the combat instructor to ask what these dungeon management rights actually are. So Rue just tells Fischl to explain it, and she starts with how dungeons are basically high-risk, high-reward resource mines for the world. But the instructor impatiently cuts her off, telling her to skip the intro and get to the real answer, which seems to be the final straw for her, seeing Coco still completely dazed on the ground. So she just grabs the girl by the leg and starts swinging her around, ignoring his pleas to treat their princess with care, and he quickly backtracks, calling Coco a goddess of destruction instead before asking them to please continue. So Rue takes over, explaining that since high-ranked dungeons are becoming rarer, their value has shot through the roof, leading to a simple philosophy for the powerful. If you can't find a dungeon, you just take one from someone else through this tournament, and the instructor finally understands that this whole thing is just a sanctioned resource war disguised as a friendly competition. This instructor reminds them the association is a business, so they won't let outsiders mess with their profits. Then he gets serious, asking Rue if he plans to hide forever before admitting he's been deep in thought, revealing he's been questioning his entire path, his future, and the very ideals he lives by. And he asks Rue if he can even see a future in this world, which sends our boy into a flashback, where we see him completely drained, telling his little fox pet to be a good kid, because he can't take the little guy with him on whatever dangerous mission he's heading out for. He leaves his sad-looking companion behind, ready to handle things on his own, and in an elevator, he recalls a promise made to a girl named Nana to erase dungeons from the world. Back in the present, the instructor warns him not to use Nana's dream as an excuse for his own suffering, but Rue just holds a picture frame, declaring with absolute resolve that he will be the one to grant her wish. This flashback ends, and right on cue, the dungeon rush begins as red portals tear open across the city, while on a rooftop below, Rue and his newly hired crew look up at the chaos unfolding above them. With a casual "shall we go," Rue signals it's time, while the Dead Tomorrow leader just yells that it's time to eat. And just like that, on June 17th, the world is plunged into chaos as dungeons appear everywhere. In a quiet town, a little girl looks out her window completely unaware of the danger, and she just points at the strange phenomenon, innocently asking her mom what it is. This scene immediately cuts to the brutal reality as a werewolf-like monster overwhelms a victim, sending a nearby civilian falling back in absolute terror at the horrific sight. This monster stands victorious over a field of fallen people, having clearly torn through the crowd, and a young man can only watch in horror, questioning why he's being forced to witness this nightmare. While Yasukage is having a full-blown panic attack about clearing a dungeon, Rue just gives him a look that says, "We're doing this," and immediately gets to work. A few moments later, he's already standing over a field of defeated goblins, which has Rikumichi seriously impressed, questioning if our boy is really a rookie. Rue casually admits he only started learning swordsmanship 6 months ago, earning praise for his raw talent, and as they move deeper into the dungeon, they spot what looks like the area boss, a massive glowing spirit wolf that's clearly on a whole other level. Rikumichi offers to jump in and help with the fight, and Rue immediately accepts, so the veteran clarifies that for this battle, he's not a coach but a proper teammate. He admits he was worried Rue would try to solo everything, praising him for being a smart leader. While Rikumichi calls the boss kind, Rue's already calculating the profit from this dungeon rush, knowing the risk is higher than usual, but with dungeons clustered together, the rewards are worth it. This scene then cuts back to the city, where Rue and his crew are stopped on an overpass at night, and Yasukage asks what's wrong. Noticing our boy is staring intently into the distance, his gaze locked onto a distant skyscraper where something is clearly off. Turns out, 2 men in suits are standing right on the edge of the roof, looking ready to jump, and Yasukage finally spots them, horrified by what he's seeing, naively asking why they do that before wondering if dungeons can even hurt people. This guild leader just scoffs from the car, asking if Yasukage is being serious right now, so Rue explains the grim reality. Dungeons are now spawning in safe zones, causing mass panic and despair. This guild leader explains the jumpers aren't hunters, just civilians who've lost all hope, because the constant fear and anxiety of the dungeon rush is enough to break anyone's spirit. Rue then drops the grim truth that this psychological toll causes more casualties than the monsters themselves, which has Coco demanding they stop talking and finally get moving already. So Rue announces a change of plans, deciding they'll split up to clear the dungeon faster. He puts a guy named Kazami in charge of the rear guard for maximum efficiency, who immediately agrees. This Dead Tomorrow leader just smirks, saying he'll trust Rue's judgment since he's the one footing the bill. With the plan set, the scene shifts to the absolute devastation the rush has already caused, and the guild leader casually waves goodbye before stepping into a portal to handle his side of things. Rue confirms he's also heading out solo, telling his new crew not to worry if he's late. Rue steps into the next dungeon, ready for whatever's waiting inside, and finds himself in a creepy forest where goblin-like creatures are already perched in the trees. They don't waste any time, immediately swarming him from every direction, but as he cuts through them, he realizes they're way tougher than they should be. He confirms that monsters in the same grade of dungeon have definitely gotten a power-up, and to make things worse, they're not just charging blindly but using coordinated attacks. This level of intelligence in low-grade mobs has him wondering if a commander is hiding nearby, so instead of wasting stamina, he just chucks a strange red canister into the crowd, which promptly explodes into a massive inferno, roasting the entire ambush party. Our boy is pretty impressed, noting this is a perfect way to conserve energy just as someone named Nozomu suggested. He notes that without flame-resistant gear, this fight is a lot tougher than it needs to be, and after the flames die down, he stands over the defeated mobs, sensing a new presence, smirking as he realizes someone he was expecting has finally shown up. Right on cue, a strange energy signature flares up in the misty forest ahead, and a mysterious figure casually steps out of a swirling pink portal, revealing a long-haired elf-like being who seems to be radiating immense power. This newcomer is absolutely thrilled to be here, confirming he was summoned, and he takes a moment to look around, identifying his new location as the human world. With a sinister smile, he's already wondering how he should play this time, and just like that, massive ice spikes erupt from the ground, tearing the entire forest apart. This elf's idea of playing starts with summoning a giant ape-like monster to flatten Rue with a club, but our boy easily dodges the attack, using a nearby tree to launch himself into the air, immediately repositioning for a devastating downward strike from above, and he plunges his sword deep into the monster's back for a critical hit, riding the momentum to slice a massive gash all the way down its spine. This beast stumbles forward in absolute agony from the blow, though it's still on its feet, clearly wounded but not out of the fight just yet. So Rue lands on a branch, already analyzing its stats and realizing this one's a glass cannon. All strength, no defense. Which doesn't stop the monster from turning around for another furious roar. But Rue is completely unfazed, noting he needs more samples before he can really understand these new mobs. With a final decisive slash, Rue takes down the massive ape monster, leaving it to collapse on the forest floor completely defeated. As he collects the loot, he gets a system notification for some unusual drops, including a strange evil heart that promises a surprise if he collects 10 of them. Meanwhile, the Dead Tomorrow leader is having the absolute time of his life in his own dungeon, while the combat instructor tells Yasukage he's heading into a portal to clear it solo. He gives the kid a strange look, commenting on how Rue is at least consistent before offering a friendly tip. Don't assume it's safe just because you're not in a dungeon. He leaves Yasukage with the heavy warning that whatever happens next is on him, and his point is proven instantly as a group of thugs attack someone right outside a bank. Meanwhile, a local gang boss is on the hunt for some hero, using the fact he has a kid as leverage, and he's sarcastically thrilled at the idea of meeting this do-gooder, clearly planning a warm welcome. Turns out, the hero is just a young man desperately trying to hide a little girl from the thugs, whispering that he'll protect her. But his quiet confidence is about to meet a harsh reality, because the thugs immediately find them, cornering the pair in a dead-end alley. Without a word, one of the goons lands a solid punch right across the young man's face, and they all proceed to beat him down while he shields the girl, mocking his heroic efforts. At that exact moment, one of the other thugs from the bank incident suddenly looks up, startled, asking his buddy if he heard something, but the guy just figures it's their victim groaning. This first guy isn't convinced, saying it sounded like a smug know-it-all, while his partner insists they're alone. Suddenly, a massive impact shakes the area as some powerful hunter makes a dramatic landing nearby, which is more than enough to startle the thugs in the alley, completely breaking their focus, and one of them spins around with his bat, demanding to know who's interrupting them. Turns out, someone is a lone silhouette now walking toward them from the end of the alley, so the gang leader tries to throw out a tough guy threat, warning the newcomer to back off. His warning is immediately proven empty as the mysterious person moves in a blur, taking down the entire crew, leaving the young man they were beating to watch from the ground, stunned by the sudden rescue. He looks up to see his savior as a woman, her legs crackling with some kind of purple energy, and mistaking her for a monster, he desperately tells the little girl to run for it. But the woman just raises her foot to crush his head as he begs her to wait. This little girl bravely steps between the elf and the fallen man, begging him not to hurt her protector, and she even offers to take the punishment herself, which seems to get his attention. So with a truly sinister smile, he agrees to her terms without a moment's hesitation, and immediately sends her flying with a single, brutal strike across the face. He then walks off, casually remarking on how fascinating humans are after all. This scene cuts to a hospital room, where Rue is watching over the young man from the alley, who finally wakes up, recognizing Rue and learning he was just 10 minutes away from being too late. This kid thanks Rue for saving him again, but Rue clarifies that it was actually Nozomu who rescued him this time, and after the guy processes this, Rue asks if he's just planning to keep the incident a secret, but when he tries to brush it off, Rue demands to know exactly what happened. This young man explains he heard screams near the dungeon and went to investigate, finding a group of thugs who had captured a little girl with some very bad intentions. So he took the first chance he got to try and rescue her, admitting he knew he was too weak, but his body just moved on its own. But his plan to hide her until his friends showed up failed when the thugs found them way too quickly. Rue tells him that once he's healed, he's being sent to someone named Kyoka's base, since Rue is too busy to train him and his only job now is to get stronger, though he adds that the kid is free to refuse the offer if he's not comfortable with it. But the young man just smiles, genuinely happy that Rue is looking out for his future, which seems to surprise Rue, who asks if he thought he was going to be angry about the whole mess. This kid is shocked Rue isn't furious, but Rue just tells him he's looking at it all wrong, explaining that instead of feeling guilty, he should focus on managing the consequences of his actions. With that out of the way, Rue announces he's leaving and tells the guy to get some rest. But the young man quickly asks what happened to the little girl he was trying to save. Rue has to tell him that by the time Nozomu got there, the girl was already gone, which cuts to Rue meeting up with the Dead Tomorrow leader, who's looking at his phone. This guy sarcastically laments how hard it is to lie to Rue before admitting he'll do it for hush money. So when Rue asks about the investigation, the leader claims there's not much info but sends a video. This footage shows the mysterious woman walking away from the alley where the attack happened, and the leader explains it's from the only working camera, which had a terrible angle. This Dead Tomorrow leader explains the attackers just pop in and out of existence, making them impossible to track, and after checking every security camera in town, he only found a single one that caught them on tape. This footage also revealed the thugs were dealt with brutally, getting slammed into the surrounding structures, meaning whoever did it possesses some absolutely monstrous raw strength to pull that off. Rue immediately worries they're dealing with another major organization on the same level as Abyss, so he asks how reliable Yasukage's intel was that the attackers claim to be from that very group. His new partner sarcastically replies it's about as likely as him becoming a top billionaire, so Rue presses him, wanting to know why he's so sure it wasn't Kyoka's members either. This completely throws the guy off, since Rue is way more interested in Kyoka's debt than their history, but he clarifies that while Abyss is full of scumbags, they don't recruit idiots who'd openly announce their affiliation. Meanwhile, the combat instructor runs into Yasukage, who's heading off to a dungeon to grind, and he can only sarcastically admire the kid's relentless work ethic, which kicks off a montage of other hunters, starting with a woman clearing a C-rank dungeon, followed by some poor girl getting chased down by a massive combat robot, and even the instructor himself is stuck clearing a gate, complaining about work the whole time, while Yasukage effortlessly one-shots a giant scorpion, thinking he might have overdone it. And elsewhere, another duo prepares to speedrun a B-rank dungeon just to get it over with, before the scene shifts to a man named North and his partner entering an S-rank gate, where they're already standing over a pile of defeated knights inside a massive castle, and when his companion asks if he's going to help, he just gives her a cold look. His partner seems completely at ease, figuring everything's fine as long as North is around, and as they walk, they note how intense the dungeon was, giving credit to some kind young people for their help. North just stoically agrees, not adding much to the conversation himself, and it turns out the help they're referring to is the same elf who was causing chaos back in the city, which makes North's partner smirk, realizing she's just stumbled upon a rare child of fortune. This scene then cuts away from the S-rank gate to a much more grounded location, shifting to a hallway where a couple of people are walking towards some intense training sounds. It's the young man from the hospital, now watching two others spar inside a training room, and the woman with him, likely Kyoka, asks if he wants to watch, but he turns her down, saying he's not in a position to guide anyone. She seems to accept his answer, turning to lead him somewhere else within the base. This scene cuts to Yasukage, apparently recovering from his injuries by chilling with some expensive booze, operating under the simple philosophy that you might die tomorrow, so you might as well live it up today. But Kyoka is not impressed, calling him out for splurging on drinks while he's still in debt, and she reminds him he's supposed to be resting by kicking the glass right out of his hand. He panics, trying to play it off by claiming he was only smelling it, not actually drinking, and after that warm welcome, he finally greets Rue, who's been watching this whole time. Rue explains he heard Yasukage got seriously hurt in a C-rank dungeon and came to check on him, which surprises Yasukage, who figures the only explanation is that the dungeon must have jumped to A rank. Kyoka just tells him to stop stalling and tell his own embarrassing story himself, so he admits he only survived because he ran into a child of fortune, leaving Rue to wonder if that's a new monster type. Nozomu drops a bombshell, explaining that a child of fortune is basically a reanimated corpse, which completely floors Yasukage, and he follows up by asking if the kid knows what happens to humans who die inside dungeons. He doesn't, so Nozomu reveals the grim truth that they become the very monsters hunters are paid to kill. He clarifies that their souls get trapped and twisted by the dungeon's rules, regardless of what happens to the body, and when Kyoka asks why he's sharing state secrets, he just jokes it's an investment for a future pay raise. Yasukage processes this, realizing why Nana never told him, but now he's just wondering how Nozomu knows all this, as Nozomu continues, explaining that while destroying the core is common knowledge, the monsters themselves are the real key. Since monsters were originally human, their numbers are finite, which is why dungeons collapse when the core is gone, meaning the entire system is just recycling fallen hunters into the next wave of dungeon mobs for others to clear. Rue then does the math, pointing out that for 400,000 dungeons to exist, over 30% of the population would have to be dead. Nozomu clarifies that not all monsters are recycled humans, just a specific dangerous type, which only confuses Rue more, who immediately demands to know what he's talking about. Kyoka cuts in, telling Nozomu to stop going on tangents and just answer the man's question, so he reveals that some dead hunters become humanoid monsters, and a rare few keep their memories, the children of fortune. Rue immediately asks how strong they are, and Nozomu casually drops that they're about 10 times stronger than a C-rank boss. This gets Rue thinking about the elf woman, wondering if she's one of them, and if they fight other monsters, and Nozomu admits they're powerful, but they're also hated and feared, precisely because they're so unique, explaining that even though they look human, people don't consider them the same species at all. To make matters worse, other monsters find them especially delicious and will hunt them down relentlessly, so Rue asks if they're born strong, but Nozomu points out that if they weren't, humans would never even notice them. Rue presses for more info, wanting to know how these children of fortune even manage to survive out there, but instead of answering, Nozomu turns the conversation around with a hypothetical question for Yasakage, asking what he would do if he ran into his own sister Nana inside a dungeon, which completely stumps the kid, who has absolutely no idea where this is going. So Nozomu decides to drop the subtlety and asks him directly, what if Nana herself had become a child of fortune, leaving Yasakage totally speechless. As he freezes up, Kyoka and Nozomu just mock him for not grasping the grim reality of the situation, so Rue cuts them off, demanding they stop messing around and just explain the logic behind the warning. Getting serious, Nozomu tells Yasakage that if he ever finds his sister in a dungeon, he has to take her down on sight, and when Yasakage asks if it's just because she's a monster, Nozomu implies it's far more complicated than that. Nozomu continues, saying if it were a regular monster, you could just pay to keep the dungeon alive and let them be. But children of fortune are a completely different story, recalling a time a comrade tried to spare a family member who'd turned, and when Yasakage nervously asks what happened, Nozomu just grins, revealing the creature came after them and had to be put down by their own hands. A horrified Yasakage demands to know what makes them so uniquely dangerous, and the answer is grim. The only way they can get stronger is through sacrifice. This scene then cuts to a different location, where a young man walks in looking for everyone, finding a guy sleeping in a chair and preparing to wake him up with a book after hearing Rue was there. This man wakes up just in time, teasing the kid for getting more composed, who just stammers he was in a hurry, and after a yawn, the guy asks where he thinks Rue could have possibly gone after his visit yesterday. This new kid puts on a brave face, looking surprisingly composed after everything, but his cool demeanor shatters when the guy in the Hawaiian shirt starts taking his picture, casually announcing he's sending it to the kid's brother, which is apparently the worst possible news. He immediately panics, trying to stop him by saying his brother is busy, but the guy couldn't care less, even adding that his brother should probably train more instead of being so occupied. He then asks the kid's opinion of his own brother, and after hearing he's kind, he declares the matter settled, offering to treat the kid to a meal, though the young man is pretty sure it's a trap to make him pay. A quick look at a phone reveals the context. The kid is a replacement for someone who died, an offer Nana bluntly rejected before leaving the chat. Elsewhere, two other hunters walk through the city, one of them wondering how long this chaotic lifestyle can possibly continue. His partner just scoffs, asking how they could evacuate when it's prime earning time. His partner just points out that without cash, you can't evacuate even if the city's crawling with monsters, admitting he's been earning a lot lately but needs the money since his wife recently got sick. This other hunter asks if he's seriously still planning to run dungeons with all that going on, but the guy clarifies he's taking a break to care for her, telling his friend to go on ahead. As they part ways, he suddenly notices a strange kid in a puffer jacket standing in the street, who mutters something completely unintelligible under his breath, and then promptly collapses face first, leading the hunters to assume he's just a common scammer. Meanwhile, in a rural village, two massive dungeon gates, one red and one blue, have just appeared. A new team of hunters shows up, and their leader is already complaining about being sleepy and needing a break. Casually shrugging off his team's complaints, they all head toward the ominous red portal. Meanwhile, another hunter team watches as two men casually walk up to a blue gate, and their leader notices his partner, Sora, is on edge, who admits one of the guys seems strange, so she keeps a close eye on them as they reach the portal's edge, where one of them flashes a sinister grin that instantly puts the veteran hunter on high alert, prompting him to immediately order Sora to stop them from entering the dungeon. Without a second's hesitation, she bursts forward with incredible speed, even launching a projectile to intercept them before they can cross the threshold. But she's a split second too late, as the men vanish right before the gate destabilizes. Her teammates finally catch up, totally confused by the sudden chaos, and the leader can only admit he was too slow, leaving everyone wondering what just happened. This hunter leader realizes with dawning horror that one of the men was a child of fortune, and his team is stunned, pointing out that these dangerous beings are appearing far too often lately. When they ask what to do, he grimly states that it's impossible to save the two men now, essentially writing them off as a lost cause the moment they cross the gate's threshold. He's proven right instantly, as inside the dungeon, one of the men is immediately betrayed by his partner. This leader, Tensen, gets on the phone to report the Child of Fortune's appearance to his superiors, confirming he has about 3 hours before he needs to move out for his next assignment. He's given new orders. The 7 stars are gathering in 2 days for a major operation. After hanging up, Tensen tells his team he's heading to an S-rank gate, leaving them with the B rank. But when Sora offers to stay, he shuts her down, coldly remarking the dead guy should have ranked up. Nozomu drops the final horrifying detail. Children of Fortune rank up by sacrificing their own family. And back with Tensen's team, he seems unbothered as the two men head into the blue gate, but Sora has a seriously bad feeling about this, even though her leader tells her to trust them. She reluctantly agrees, then asks why he's trying to bring back the 7 stars when league prep is done, and Tensen reveals a participant was sacrificed in a dungeon, leading Sora to suspect foul play. He explains that 3 different people all recommended the exact same person to fill the empty slot, a kid named Lo, who just so happens to be Nana's brother. Meanwhile, someone calls up a guy named Fischl, demanding to know why he recommended Nana's brother for the tournament, taunting him about the time Nana put him in the hospital for 2 months for calling her trash. Fischl just smirks, saying he remembers perfectly and would love to thank her for it by dancing on her grave. This guy on the line dares Fischl to repeat himself, looking absolutely ready for a fight, but Fischl just laughs it off, completely missing the fact his partner is radiating pure murderous intent, who then asks why he's pushing Nana's brother into a death tournament against her wishes. Fischl claims he had no choice since even the 7 stars in Okamoto recommended the kid, but his partner isn't buying it, reminding him that trusting Okamoto is a terrible idea. Changing the subject, Fischl recalls that Nana left something rare for her brother, but the association has it locked down, and his partner immediately realizes Fischl's true motive. He's after whatever that item is. As Fischl smirks, the blonde man starts recording him, catching him completely off guard, then asks how he even knew about the item, revealing it's a top-secret matter within the association, and Fischl's expression darkens, realizing his partner knows far more than he let on. Fischl's partner gets a stern warning to stay away from Nana's secret item if he values his life, but Fischl immediately plays dumb, claiming he's too tired to remember what they were even talking about, then pivots to asking why his partner and 2 others seem to value Rue so much. And as they drive, he just vaguely says their next move is all about doing a good deed for the day. That's when his partner spots Rue himself, sitting on a park bench with 2 unfamiliar men, who seem to be trying to help him out by offering him a bottle of water, though they're also sizing him up, commenting on his strange clothes and thin frame. Rue takes a sip and then, for absolutely no reason, spits a mouthful of water right in one guy's face, leaving the poor dude completely soaked and stunned while his friend checks if he's okay. So he tries asking Rue for his name, but our boy just gives him a totally blank stare. Rue's dead-eyed stare is starting to unnerve the 2 men who are just trying to be helpful, and the blonde guy's eyes practically glow with alarm as he senses something is deeply wrong, while his partner whispers that Rue is looking at them like they're his next meal. Thinking fast, the blonde guy nervously offers up a bag of groceries to de-escalate the situation, hoping that maybe this whole thing is just a misunderstanding over an empty stomach, and for a moment Rue's intense gaze softens as if he's snapping out of a trance. This other guy immediately relaxes, convincing his partner that Rue was just hungry, not dangerous, and he points to Rue now calmly accepting the food as proof that he was right all along. With the tension broken, the blonde guy admits he was genuinely scared for a second there, brushing it off as him being jumpy, completely missing that Rue is now inspecting a raw steak. This blonde guy freaks out, trying to stop Rue from chowing down on the raw steak he just handed over, but Rue just calmly starts eating a carrot instead, leaving the 2 men completely bewildered by his behavior. His partner, the driver, can't shake the feeling that something is deeply wrong with this kid, asking if the welfare center was closed, only to hear everyone there was taken to the association. Still, the blonde guy seems unfazed, watching Rue now happily eating a snack bar like nothing happened. Later on, the driver brings it up again, asking why seeing Rue made him think of a powerful figure named Liteus, and the blonde guy admits it's not logical, just that their overall vibe feels uncannily similar. He explains that both of them give off this distinctly inhuman aura that sets them apart from everyone else, which makes his partner jump to the obvious conclusion, asking if he's saying Rue isn't even human. This driver brushes that off, but then gets serious, demanding to know how his partner knows so much about Lidos in the first place. This blonde guy admits he heard about Lidos from someone named Yuyu, confirming the driver's suspicion, and his partner notes that Yuyu is usually guarded, so getting that info means he's earned some serious trust. This driver jokingly asks if he's planning to sell secrets, but the blonde guy just asks if he'd actually pay for them, to which the driver agrees, as long as the information is genuinely valuable. This conversation shifts to Lo, with the blonde guy recalling his promise to train Nana's brother alongside Yasukage, and when asked if Lo is still running dungeons, he says they can all rest after the current rush is over. He then cryptically says, tomorrow, prompting his partner to wish him luck meeting Lighthouse. And the very next day, he steps out of a portal into a completely different world with a floating city. He's completely baffled, realizing he's somehow been transported into a digital space, and before he can even process it, a tiny fox-like creature suddenly appears on his shoulder. He's immediately startled by the little fox Pi, who apparently hitched a ride without asking, trying to explain that dungeons are dangerous and it should have given him a heads up. Pi, however, is having none of that and just leaps off his shoulder in a huff, immediately bolting ahead across the strange platform, ignoring his warnings to wait up. This little creature runs right to the edge, peering down into the digital abyss below, where they're both greeted by the sight of massive cubes floating in the void. This makes him wonder if the dungeon's real core is actually located way down there. So after telling Pi to hold on tight, he scoops the little creature up and takes a running leap straight off the platform toward the distant floating city. He plummets through the digital sky, diving headfirst into this bizarre new world. He's barely started his dive when he's already wondering if this was a terrible idea, as they both splash down hard into what looks like a massive body of water. But Pi just gracefully lands on the surface, which turns out to be a perfect mirror, revealing they're now standing on a reflection of the sky and the floating city above them. He quickly realizes this must be some kind of mirror world, an exact copy of the real one, and it's completely silent as they start walking through the deserted, idyllic landscape. That's when he spots someone just sitting calmly in the middle of the village, prompting him to immediately draw his sword and get ready for a fight. But the guy doesn't even move, leaving him totally confused about the lack of aggression, and Pi, showing zero fear, just walks right up and pats the stranger's leg like an old friend. This old man just sits there, radiating this intense, sorrowful energy, seemingly accepting his fate, and even Pi is freaking out as our hero raises his sword, ready to end the standoff. But the guy doesn't even flinch, just bowing his head as the blade comes down. This tense moment suddenly breaks, leaving our hero completely confused about what's happening, and that's when the old man starts glowing, murmuring that he just wants to go back, before dissolving into golden particles right in front of them, repeating his final wish. Our hero can only watch, realizing this wasn't an enemy, but some kind of lingering echo. So he and P continue on through the silent village. But the phenomenon isn't over yet. They pass more villagers who are also fading away, all of them pleading to go back, and he finally gets it. This entire place is just a graveyard of memories for people long gone. Another echo, this time a little girl, cries out for her brother while begging to go home, and he realizes this dungeon is different. The spirits aren't aggressive, but they have a strong will. Or more accurately, he can feel a deep, lingering resentment coming from every single one of them. He just keeps walking as more of these sorrowful memories dissolve into golden particles around him, and when Pi gets worried, he reassures the little fox, admitting the scene reminded him of Nana. As they press on, they spot a dark silhouette standing ominously in front of a massive door, which immediately makes Pi freak out, sensing something is seriously wrong with this new presence. This shadowy person turns with a smirk, cryptically asking our hero if he wants to see her, then taunts him further, questioning if he really doesn't want to see her again. Getting dead serious, our hero tells Pi to stay back, preparing for whatever this is. Without a second thought, our hero charges the mysterious person, sword at the ready, but the attack is met by an identical red blade, revealing his opponent is a perfect copy, and this doppelganger immediately goes on the offensive, matching his every move, launching them both into a high-speed duel that echoes through the empty village. Pi can only watch from the sidelines, completely terrified by the sudden battle, as the copy lands a solid kick that sends our hero stumbling backward, leaving him to realize that his opponent's movements are eerily familiar, because this thing is using his own fighting style against him, move for move. He desperately parries a powerful downward slash from his mirror image, but the copy's blade still slices past his face, a dangerously close call. Their blades collide with enough force to shatter the ground, sending poor Pi flying through the air, and the little fox cries out as it's tossed around by the sheer shockwave of their fight. It lands hard, completely terrified by the sudden and brutal duel unfolding right in front of it, but before our hero can react, his copy is already swinging in again, this time aiming its attack straight for the helpless Pi caught in the middle. He screams its name as the doppelganger's blade descends, about to strike the little creature, but at the last possible second, he slides in, blocking the sword just inches from Pi's paw. He quickly scoops up his trembling companion, looking absolutely stunned by the close call, and that's when he finally understands. It's not just copying, it's perfectly duplicating his movements. As Pi scrambles onto his shoulder, he's left wondering what kind of twisted dungeon this really is. He's still holding Pi, who's absolutely wailing after that terrifyingly close call, and the little fox's cries seem to completely stun his doppelganger into inaction, because the copy just stands there, its aggressive expression suddenly softening. So our hero tries to calm his terrified companion, still wary of his opponent, but then he sees his own sword lying discarded on the ground, as his mirror image gently picks up Pi, looking surprisingly gentle and sad, even nuzzling the little creature, which seems to calm Pi right down, and that's when he realizes the copy stopped fighting because it didn't want to hurt the fox, which is immediately followed by the doppelganger dissolving into golden particles just like the villagers, leaving behind nothing but a pile of dust and a single glowing golden orb. With Pi still sniffling in his arms, he spots the glowing golden orb left behind by his defeated copy, which he immediately scoops up from the pile of dust where his double had just vanished. A system window pops up right away, identifying the strange item as a crystal of sorrow, and its description reveals it can give a voice to the voiceless, specifically for communicating with non-humans. Putting two and two together, he offers the crystal straight to Pi, telling the little fox to eat it, and Pi looks absolutely thrilled, opening its mouth wide for the glowing snack. But the orb practically leaps into its mouth, leaving Pi flustered and claiming it wasn't its fault. In that exact moment, he realizes he can suddenly understand what Pi is actually saying, which sends the little fox into a frenzy, ecstatic that it can finally talk to its big brother. Our hero, however, just deadpans that Pi needs to stop calling him that immediately. He just tells the newly talkative Pi that it's time to go home, completely dodging the big brother comment, and Pi, full of energy, immediately volunteers to go smash the dungeon core to get them out. So with a surprisingly hard headbutt, the little fox shatters the core, opening up their exit portal. Back in his room, our hero hits a dead end researching the dungeon, suspecting his clearance level is too low, while P is completely passed out, sleeping soundly after its big adventure. Unable to let it go, he makes a late-night call while checking in on his new companion, getting an earful from Yu for the timing, but he insists it's something important. After explaining the whole bizarre dungeon experience, he finally gets to the main point, telling Yu he couldn't find any data on it, guessing it was a special type dungeon, and Yu explains those dungeons manifest an explorer's deepest desire, leaving our hero totally baffled. Yu explains the dungeon literally manifested his deepest desire as a guardian with his exact strength, and these obsessions can apparently range from money and power to even human-human relationships. So to beat the guardian, he would have had to somehow surpass that core obsession of his, which leaves our hero completely stunned, trying to process what that even means. Because according to Yu, that's the only realistic way to actually win in those kinds of dungeons. He says you either have to fulfill the desire or let it go, but if it were that easy, it wouldn't be an obsession. Lo desperately asks if there's any other way to clear a dungeon like that, and Yu just teases him for stuttering, though our boy insists he's just nervous. But the clenched fist tells a different story, showing just how much this is affecting him. Yu finally offers a simple workaround: hire strong backup, assuming you've got the money for it. While Pi is sleeping soundly without a single care in the world, our hero is busy putting the pieces together from his talk with Yu, Yu. It finally clicks that the doppelganger was the embodiment of his deepest obsession, and it only vanished because his wish to have his sister Nana back was somehow fulfilled. At that exact moment, P.I. wakes up and sleepily stumbles over to him, finding him just sitting there, completely lost in thought about this whole thing. This little fox seems to sense his mood, telling him not to be sad, which leads him to finally ask if P.I. is actually his sister, Nana. He decides right then that even if she's not human anymore, he doesn't care, and with that heavy thought hanging in the air, 10 days pass in the city. 10 days later, a couple of new explorers show up for a meeting, a huge guy and a quiet girl, who walk into Lo's new office, with the big guy immediately impressed by the swanky digs. Lo just points out they're 2 hours early for their scheduled appointment, ever the professional, but the guy just shrugs, saying he'd never be late when there's money on the line. As he goes to get the paperwork, the girl, Kanatsu, quietly takes a seat on the couch, and Yu immediately notices something's wrong, asking if she's been hurt recently, which is when the big guy reveals she was stabbed from behind by a temp on their last mission. He explains they were forced to take 2 useless newbies on a skill book run 5 days ago, and after they got the book, one temp set off a bomb while Kanatsu was rescuing the other. This traitor then used a stun item to freeze everyone for a second before going straight for her back. Her partner explains the traitor's plan was to hit Kanatsu with a double debuff while she was distracted saving the other temp. But luckily for them, the backstabber was all talk and no skill, completely fumbling the attack because he was too slow. Lo asks if they do a lot of these skill book retrieval jobs, and the guy just says they'll do anything for good money. But he admits this last job felt seriously off, even for a standard retrieval mission. He explains that when he confronted the client about Kanatsu's medical bills, the whole situation got even stranger, because the client just casually said they wanted even more skill books, promising to pay whatever it took. This immediately raised a huge red flag, since only top guilds or the association buy books in that kind of bulk. And when he tried digging into the client's background, he hit a wall, finding they weren't tied to any known organization. That's when Lo's assistant, Yasukage, chimes in, saying he might have a lead on the mysterious buyers. Remembering he heard about someone buying up tons of skill books right before the dungeon rush began, Yasukage confirms this mystery buyer was throwing cash around, offering way over market price for the skill books, and Yu immediately connects this to the other team's job, realizing both requests came in 5 days ago, so the big guy admits he has no clue what their endgame is, but he's definitely curious to find out. He even offers to team up with Lo to investigate, but our boy would rather just pay for the results later. After a quick grumble about rich people, Lo cuts the chatter and gets straight back to business, handing over a folder with the detailed payment list for their last mission together, which the guy takes, saying he'll have someone named Yukine look it over before confirming everything, and Lo just deadpans that he should have brought Yukine in the first place, but the guy just brushes it off, announcing they're heading out to get some food for Kanatsu, who's already enjoying a snack. Lo then asks Yu why he even bothered showing up, and Yu reveals he came to give them a warning. Yu casually warns Yasukage over the phone that he's being tailed, hoping it's not a stalker, and back in the office, Yasukage looks genuinely concerned while Lo just listens in on the call. Later, Lo is getting dressed back at his place, clearly still thinking about everything that's happened when he spots P sitting by the door, looking like it's about to stage a one-fox protest. He asks if the little guy is mad, because P is giving him the full silent treatment, so Lo reminds it that going into a dungeon is completely off-limits until its leg properly heals. This little fox argues back, pointing out that Lo is hurt too, so it should be allowed to go, but he tries to explain that his own injuries are nothing compared to what happened to P.I., flashing back to a nasty fight where the little creature got swatted by a giant mantis monster. Lo finishes by pointing to its bandaged leg, saying it was a close call and needs to rest. To make up for it, Lo asks what P.I. wants for dinner, and the little fox promises to get better soon, immediately rattling off an extremely specific list of its favorite foods with hearts in its eyes, and the request hits Lo like a ton of bricks, because he recognizes that menu instantly, flashing back to his sister Nana begging him to make those exact same dishes for her, a memory where he complained about her weird tastes, which clearly made her upset, but even back then, he couldn't say no and just sighed before agreeing to cook for her, which is exactly what happens in the present as he looks down at P's hopeful face, so he gives in, promising to make the whole meal just to cheer the little guy up. Later, while he's busy cooking in the kitchen, Pi watches him intently, and the little fox asks why he's suddenly being so nice when he wasn't like this before. Lo asks if he was really that harsh before, but Pi clarifies he just never smiled, so he tries one out, asking the little fox if the look even suits him, and Pi admits it actually looks pretty nice while he finishes up their meal. He serves up the full spread, reminding P.I. that vegetables are also on the menu, but the little fox gives him a hard no, kicking off a classic dinner table standoff. Just as he's about to lay down the law, his phone starts buzzing on the table, and it's an unknown number which he picks up, looking slightly annoyed by the interruption. This person on the other end is panicking, saying Lord Shun is unreachable and they need Lo's help, which makes Lo immediately demand to know what happened to Yasukage, remembering Yuu's warning. This caller explains Yasukage left for a B-rank dungeon 3 days ago, and they just assumed he was with Lo. This caller admits that for all the Kazami family's cash, they don't have any items to force entry into a dungeon, so Lo immediately asks who was tailing Yasukage, connecting the dots from Yuu's earlier warning, and learns the tail was just a random thug. But the real problem is Yasukage went into a B-rank dungeon alone, which has Lo asking if Yasukage has a forced entry item, already planning a rescue mission himself. But Nozomu explains Yasukage's brother is unreachable unpredictable on a mission and will go berserk if anything happens, leaving Lo to consider just how bad things will get if that notoriously powerful brother gets involved. So he switches gears, telling Nozomu he actually has the item they need, but it's not going to be free since his own special escape skill is on cooldown, meaning he can't just pop in there himself, and Nozomu offers a generous deal, promising to pay him back with a similar item plus a skill book as interest. But Lo shuts that down instantly, demanding he get the payment for it today. Nozomu quickly agrees to the deal, promising to have Konatsu deliver the payment right away, and soon after, Lo is driven out to the dungeon's location, a swirling red portal in the countryside, where Nozomu apologizes for the trouble, handing over a fancy-looking potion as a down payment, which the system identifies as a rare blood replenishing agent, a seriously valuable item, because with no crafting skills available yet, these things can only be found as dungeon drops, and realizing how serious the Kazami family is, he heads for the portal, wondering about their motives. Inside, he finds himself in a desolate wasteland under a shattered blood-red moon, making his way through the ruins toward a massive gate guarded by two armored sentinels, whose eyes immediately flare to life as one of them raises its sword to attack. But Lo easily dodges the first strike, already moving to counter the dungeon's welcome party. He wastes no time, launching himself at the first sentinel with a flying kick right to the face, using the momentum to vault clean over its head as the monster stumbles back. And after a perfect landing, he's already spinning around for the counterattack, driving his blade straight through the Guardian's eye slit with zero hesitation, which sends the armored husk crashing down into a pile of dust. Standing over the remains, he can't help but wonder if B-rank dungeons are supposed to be this easy, but a glance at the ominous red moon tells him something is definitely wrong here, and just as he senses danger, he's forced to desperately swing his sword to block an attack. But it's too late, and he's sent sprawling to the ground after taking a nasty hit, only to look down and see his own arm on the ground with a bloody message inviting him deeper. Staring down at where his arm used to be, Lo is absolutely furious at the dungeon's welcome gift. He's now stuck in a massive chamber with a giant pit of seriously questionable-looking water. To test his theory, he pulls out a random piece of monster meat from his inventory and casually tosses it into the murky depths to see what happens next. This meat dissolves instantly, confirming the water is super corrosive and a huge problem. Thinking on his feet, he pulls out a monster hide instead, hoping his next idea is the right one. He throws a piece in and it actually floats, giving him a solid plan to cross the gap. His logic is simple. A monster from this dungeon should be resistant to its own toxic environment. So he creates a makeshift bridge out of the hide and makes a run for it across the water. Safely on the other side, he finds a bloody arrow pointing the way, a clear sign from Yasukage. Following Yasukage's trail, Lo enters a massive ruined cathedral with more sentinels waiting at the far end. So he activates a skill, conjuring a blue energy ring as he prepares to close the distance fast, launching a thin wire from his hand that wraps securely around one of the giant pillars, and using it like a grappling hook, he swings through the air to bypass the long walkway, landing right in front of the two new armored guards, completely skipping their patrol route. These two actually activate, pledging glory to their castle as they prepare to attack him. But Lo is way faster, whipping his wire out to ensnare both of them at the same time, leaving the guards completely stunned as they're suddenly yanked off their feet and pulled together, slamming into each other and getting hogtied before they can even swing their weapons. And with his enemies neutralized, Lo grabs a giant bone to finish the job with some style. He uses the giant bone to absolutely demolish the two tied-up sentinels, then casually dumps their remains into the acid pit for good measure, and after tossing his makeshift weapon aside, he continues up the stairs, finding yet another one of Yasukage's helpful bloody arrows on the ground. Lo sarcastically thanks his boss for leaving such clear directions so he doesn't get lost, while the sentinel heads gurgle about avenging their king from their watery grave. He finally enters the main chamber to find Yasukage trapped in a barrier with some guy looming over him, and it looks like that shield is just about to shatter under the pressure of the guy's sword, so the red-haired swordsman turns to face Lo, clearly not happy about the interruption, revealing some seriously demonic eyes and a look that says he's the final boss of this dungeon. This boss swings his massive sword down to finish Yasukage, whose shield is about to break, but at the very last second, Lo's blade flies in and parries the attack, and our boy immediately follows up, rushing in to close the distance on the dungeon boss, who just recalls his sword with a smirk, ready for a real fight now, launching a powerful counterattack that meets Lo's blade in a massive explosion of force. And the sheer power behind the swing is enough to catch Lo completely off guard, giving the boss an opening to land a clean slash right across his shoulder, but Lo grits his teeth and manages to block the follow-up strike, which seems to genuinely surprise the boss, who wasn't expecting this much resistance, so Lo uses that brief hesitation to backflip away and create some much-needed space. Seeing an opening, Lo just yeets his sword straight at the boss's head, who looks up just in time to see the projectile coming for him. But our boy is already in the air, following up his own throw with another attack, launching a flying kick while the boss swings his massive blade to intercept. And the guy just smirks, clearly enjoying the challenge from this unexpected guest, catching Lo's leg with his forearm and looking absolutely furious at the interruption. So Lo pivots on the ground, bringing his sword around for an immediate counter. But their blades clash with the boss, easily overpowering our boy's desperate parry, revealing a nasty little surprise hidden in his sword's hilt, a concealed dagger, and he drives it right into Lo's arm, grinning like a maniac at his dirty trick. Lo just smirks, revealing he totally saw that cheap shot coming and had a plan for it all along, whipping out that rare blood replenishing potion he got from Nozomu, but not for the reason you'd think, because instead of healing, he yeets the entire bottle right into the boss's face, face, which causes the guy to absolutely melt down, screaming as his body starts to dissolve. Turns out, Lo realized the dungeon's corrosive water affects its own monsters, and that potion worked the same way. But even with his genius play, he's still seriously hurt from the fight and barely staying on his feet. With the boss reduced to a puddle, his attention turns back to the still unconscious Yasukage, so he drags the kid up, already planning some serious revenge training for Nozomu for this whole ordeal. Just as they're about to leave, a massive glowing blue crystal materializes right in front of them, and a mysterious voice from inside says it's been waiting for him, ending the dungeon run on a huge cliffhanger. This crystal reveals an elf-like man, and Lo immediately recognizes him as the one behind everything, who seems just as surprised, saying he didn't expect to see our boy again so soon, which has Lo confused, since he thought Latias were rare and this one looks a bit different. But before he can process his headache, the elf accuses him of killing his brother. And while Lo has no clue what he's talking about, the guy demands to know why he did it. Done with the conversation, Lo shoves Yasukage to safety and launches himself forward, unleashing a massive green energy slash that slams his new enemy into the wall. But the sheer power of the being makes him realize this thing isn't a Lightas at all. Turns out, there's already a file on this exact kind of monster back in the real world, describing a survivor's encounter with a brutal creature nicknamed Villain, who just looks like a Lightas. This file reveals this villain only hunts people who harm a Lightas, and apparently he shows up for revenge specifically after a Lightas has died 3 separate times. If the target hides, Villain just rampages through high-ranked dungeons until the Lightas respawns. Lo tries to process this, wondering if they're twins and how the whole 3-life system even works, since he's met a Lightas before but is absolutely certain he never laid a finger on it. Meanwhile, Villain recovers from the attack, muttering that there aren't enough people here for him, his gaze then landing on the unconscious Yasukage, who's now clearly on the hit list. This guy flashes a seriously creepy smile, his mismatched eyes glowing with pure malice, and before Lo can even react, Villain lunges forward with unbelievable speed, grabbing our boy by the throat and once again demanding to know why he killed his brother. Struggling in Villain's grip, Lo desperately insists he's got the wrong guy, but he knows he's in deep trouble, realizing he's too worn out to fight this monster, and with Yasukage still out cold, his only real option is to find a way to escape. But Villain just slams him into the ground, completely overpowering him with raw strength. This elf then lectures him about how his helpful brother was betrayed by ungrateful humans. Just as a massive red warning window from the system suddenly materializes in front of Lo, and Villain asks what he used to break his brother, actually grabbing the system window itself, admitting he loves watching humans tremble in fear before he finishes them off. Realizing this is way more than just a threat, Lo knows he has to stop him now, so he launches himself forward, landing a solid punch right across the villain's face. That punch sends Villain flying across the room, leaving a nice new crater in the floor, but Lo is completely gassed, barely able to stand after that last-ditch effort, so Villain offers a surprisingly generous deal. Sign a contract and he'll walk away, though Lo remembers the fine print. Signing means he can never enter a dungeon again or he'll die. Villain suddenly changes his mind, deciding he'd rather just end this the old-fashioned way, gathering a massive ball of dark, spiky energy in his hand and launching it straight at Lo, who braces for impact with his sword, except he's suddenly paralyzed, completely unable to move as system warnings flood his vision, when out of nowhere his little fox companion Pi jumps in front of him, taking the full blast, leaving Lo to watch in horror, screaming its name as the attack connects. Pi collapses to the ground, a massive hole clean through its body after taking the blast for Lo, and Villain seems genuinely surprised that the little fox would sacrifice itself like that, so he uses some kind of green energy to lift Pi's body into the air, holding it hostage, which has Lo absolutely losing it, screaming for the guy to let his companion go. This elf seems to recognize Pi as his brother, completely confused as to why he'd protect a human, leaving Lo totally cornered and desperately trying to figure out his next move. With no other choice, he pulls out a mysterious purple card, deciding it's his only shot, and the item immediately starts glowing with an intense golden light as he activates it, erupting into a massive pillar of energy that completely blindsides everyone in the room. Villain stares in disbelief at the emerging silhouette, asking if that's the real Villain. From the pillar of light emerges a perfect double, leaving the original Villain completely stunned, and the scene shifts to a memory of the two brothers having a surprisingly casual chat, with the newcomer asking his twin why he's suddenly spacing out in the middle of their talk. Back in the present, the new elf, Lightas, smiles, saying he never expected to reunite like this, admitting he can't recall their last meeting, but has been watching movies his brother recommended. Villain's entire demeanor softens, agreeing that it has indeed been a very long time, and in a sudden burst of emotion, he rushes forward to embrace his long-lost brother, who seems worried about the hug, but Villain just says how much he's missed him. This murderous rage from moments before has completely vanished, replaced by genuine relief. As Lightas reveals, he's been counting every single day for the 351 years they were apart. While the two brothers have their big emotional reunion, Lo is just stuck watching the whole scene unfold, still clutching his shoulder from the nasty injuries he took during the fight. Lightas finally notices him, but Villain just scoffs, clearly not thrilled to see the human still standing, prompting his brother to scold him for trying to kill people, though Villain insists he didn't do it. Villain then asks if he's actually planning to save Lo, and Lightas confirms that's exactly the plan. explaining that since Lo's summon brought them together, he feels he owes the guy a huge favor. So as a thank you, he casts a massive healing spell that envelops both Lo and the unconscious Yasukage, and our boy can only watch in shock as the powerful green energy instantly mends his wounds. He thanks Litaz, who just says he's the one who should be grateful for the unexpected family reunion, which gets Lo thinking about why these two incredibly powerful brothers were even separated to begin with. Lo, being the curious guy he is, asks the brothers how two beings this powerful could have possibly been kept apart, but Villain immediately gets defensive, warning our boy that asking too many questions is a good way to get himself unalived. Lydias manages to calm his brother down, who reluctantly agrees to chill out for a second, explaining that after some mysterious incident, they were forced into separate dungeons and couldn't meet without getting hurt. When Lo naturally asks what kind of incident could do that, the brothers just go completely silent, and Lytas dodges the question with a smirk, basically telling him to mind his own business for his own good. This gets Lo thinking there must be some higher power involved, something strong enough to keep even Villain in check. Villain, however, is already bored of this conversation and asks his brother why he's still talking to the human, then turns on Lo, calling him a useless piece of junk for wasting some kind of treasure. And with a wave of green energy, he forcibly yanks a glowing blue card right out of Lo's system inventory. Villain examines the glowing blue card he just snatched, finding the whole situation rather interesting, when a green energy hand erupts from it, grabbing his arm while sending Lo a help me message. Lo is completely floored, realizing this system item is somehow intelligent and actively communicating with him, but Villain is not impressed in the slightest and just threatens to crush the card for its little stunt, until everyone's attention snaps back to Pi, who's suddenly in critical condition, making Lo absolutely frantic. He begs Lydas for help, but the elf explains he can't save the fox because its own power is rejecting his healing magic. This also means that any human medicine or healing abilities would be completely useless against the fatal wound, so Lo desperately asks for any way to just keep Pi alive temporarily, promising he'll find a real cure himself. Lydas agrees to a temporary fix, casting a spell to freeze Pi's time for exactly 7 days. With the fox stabilized in a magic bubble, Litias turns to his brother, asking if Villain knows something more. Villain offers to share what he knows about Pi's condition, but Lo refuses to beg for help, figuring it's a lost cause since Villain already hates his guts for what happened to the fox, and honestly, he gets it. He wouldn't forgive someone who hurt his companion either, so he just declares them even and prepares to carry Yasukage out of the dungeon for good. Lydas tells his brother he doesn't have to force himself to help the human, but Villain stops Lo, giving him a final choice: ask for help or leave Pi's fate to chance. Our boy is completely stunned, questioning if the guy who just tried to murder him is serious, which earns him a smug look from Villain, who thought he was smarter than that, and Lydas, tired of the games, tells his brother to just get on with it already. When Lo asks if he can save Pi, Villain gets seriously offended by the implication he's somehow less capable than his brother. Lo, done with the back and forth, just asks Villain to pick a method and get on with it, prompting Lytis to tell his brother to stop dragging things out since he's usually so direct, explaining that after centuries apart, he'd rather just spend time with his family, not humans. But Villain reassures him they'll meet again, implying this reunion has a time limit. Then he turns back to Lo, offering a strange choice on how to save the little fox, and our boy immediately declares he wants to save Pi while keeping it alive. No question, which makes Villain smirk, casually mentioning he thought Lo wanted to return Pi to its original form. A bombshell that leaves Lo completely speechless, asking if that's even possible, revealing he always suspected Pi was someone named Nana but thought it was just a delusion, and Villain just tells him to hand over the fox, warning him not to make him angry. Lo, practically vibrating with excitement, asks what he needs to do to get Pi back to her original form, and Villain just smirks, gathering a ball of green energy as if this is all just a fun little side project, then levitates the fox in a protective bubble, preparing to work his mysterious magic. But as he touches the sphere, a strange purple vortex of energy appears on Pi's forehead, which Villain finds genuinely interesting, explaining that humans who die in dungeons usually just become monsters, a revelation that has Lo hanging on his every word, completely stunned, because apparently Pi is a special case, becoming something that's neither human nor monster, and while Villain snaps that he's not a walking encyclopedia, he figures it's connected to the dungeon's highest existence, which sends Lo's mind racing about a potential final boss or even a dungeon king, realizing that if such a hierarchy exists, humanity has barely scratched the surface of what dungeons truly are. Lydas points out that if they were plotting something, they wouldn't be so helpful, which Lo has to admit is true, so he cuts right to the chase, asking what he needs to do to return Pi to her original form, and Villain, enjoying this way too much, smirks and says he'll first have to make a choice, putting our boy on edge with that incredibly smug look on his face, then asks if he really thinks he can handle what's coming next. But Lo is all in, declaring he'll do anything and that the price seems surprisingly light, which gets a nod from Villain, who then casually mentions the success rate is only 50%, and even with those coin flip odds, Lo accepts the terms without hesitation, thanking the brothers and genuinely hoping they can stay together from now on. Then he opens a portal and, carrying Yasukage, finally leaves the dungeon for good. This moment Lo leaves the dungeon, Lytas begins to dissolve into golden light, much to his brother's horror, confirming that the summon was temporary and his time in this realm is officially up, leaving Villain to watch helplessly as his brother fades away with a promise to meet again. Back in the city, Lo wastes no time getting started on Villain's incredibly sketchy instructions, preparing a knife to begin the blood ritual that's supposed to turn Pi back into a human, a process that requires him to continuously use his own blood while praying for her return. And Villain's voiceover explains this could take days or even a month, with no guarantee of success. But Lo is absolutely committed, declaring he'll bet everything on that slim possibility. 5 days into the ritual, he's looking completely exhausted with no change in Pai's condition, but his resolve is stronger than ever, completely certain that Nana will return to him. This ritual is punctuated by a jarring memory of someone falling from a skyscraper at night, which is interrupted by a call from a very worried Nozomi, who's been trying to reach him for days, and though Lo tries to play it cool, she immediately clocks how weak his voice sounds, so he just tells her to stay away from his house for a while before abruptly hanging up. He's shocked to realize over 10 days have passed, feeling his body getting weaker from the constant strain, wondering if he can even hold out long enough for Nana to return when he hears a sudden noise. A loud crash from the other room has him rushing over to check on the ritual, where he finds a young woman kneeling on the floor, completely disoriented and confused, but she looks up, recognizes him instantly, and calls him her big brother. Overwhelmed with emotion, Nana tackles him in a massive hug, proving the insane gamble actually worked. With tears in his own eyes, Lo finally gets to say the words he's been waiting for. "Welcome back, Nana," and she just collapses into his arms, finally home and reunited with her big brother after so long.